clicks the mic. All right. So I hope you've all enjoyed the Trans-Pacific Open Source Conference to date. The last several days we've been looking at largely the projects that are in open source, how people are using it, how we can use it in new ways or different ways, some of the challenges that we are up against, and as well as some of our strengths. To wrap up the conference, we decided to take a look and see how we can actually get involved with open source. This is often a topic that is fairly opaque to people. They ask, well, here's this great body of software. I can't believe it. I get this, this CD or these mini CDs or even a DVD full of technology and software. And it's like this gift. It just comes. Where did it come from? And if I want to give something back, how do I do that? So I came up with 10 different ways that you can get involved. We're going to cover the two most obvious ones right away, and then we're going to go into different ways to get involved that are often overlooked. I often get asked why one would want to get involved with open source. Usually they ask me, why did you get involved? What was your motivation? Why do you spend all this time? Because until this past year, what I did for open source was on my own time. It was my evenings, it was my weekends, it was the spare moments I had at work. And for a lot of people, it's kind of a head scratcher. Why do you do that? I mean, you weren't getting paid for it, but it's hard work, right? Well, what I do, yes, it's fairly difficult. So why do people get involved? And we can turn that around, and then you can ask yourself, well, why should I get involved, or should I get involved? Well, for some people, it's a matter of networking. It's a way to meet like-minded people. I was talking with one of the coordinators of the conference here, and she's involved with Wikipedia as an editor. And Wikipedia, of course, is the collaborative encyclopedia that's online. And for her, it's a social thing. It's a way to contribute to a larger body, but she also gets to interact with people that are interested in the same things. For a software developer, it's a great way to meet other software developers. It's a great way to come in contact with people in industry. Some people do it for self-improvement reasons. It's kind of like exercising. The more you exercise, theoretically, the more fit you become. Well, when you get involved with open source, you're often bringing a lot of skills into play, and a range of skills, from social skills to technical skills. And it's a real low-impact way to exercise these skills. So some people do it for self-improvement reasons. I want to learn how to write code better. I want to learn how to work in a group. For university students, it's a great experience to actually find out what it's like to work in a real-world development cycle where you've got people around the world that are working together. It's not something that you often get in an academic setting. You get how you work with other people in academia, but how do you work with other people in general in industry? So some people do it for self-improvement. But probably the biggest reason people do it is because they want to feed back into that cycle. They've seen this huge gift of technology. We have a fellow from Amazon here, and they use a lot of open source. Google is built on open source from the ground up. I've used open source for over a decade now in business dealings. I've run companies on open source. It's served me very well. A lot of people want to feed back into that cycle and support it and actually see more things come out of it and make sure that that resource doesn't go away. And there is kind of a selfish interest there at times, like I want to get more out of it. And I believe that if I give a little bit, I'm going to get more. So people sometimes give specifically because they're hoping to get something even greater back. Sometimes that getting back is in the form of fun. Sometimes in the form of enjoyment. Sometimes in the form of community. So if you go around and you ask people who are involved in the open source community, and as we go through the 10 reasons, you'll start to see that it's a lot more than just software developers and businessmen. When you ask people who are involved in the open source community why, you'll get all kinds of different answers. They generally fall into one of these 4 categories, though. So how can you get involved with open source? And this is the first of the 10 ways that we're going to talk about. This is the obvious one, right? You download the source code and you say, I want this new feature, or I wish it did this. And if you ask the wrong person, they'll just tell you, well, you've got the code. Why don't you write it? Go, 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 go. You're smart. Interestingly enough, there are remarkably few software developers in the world compared to people who do other things. We're a minority. But if you do write software, or you're interested in writing software, this is the obvious way of getting involved with open source software. Add more code to it. Well, how do you do that? Do we have any software? Who's a software developer here? Okay, we've got a few. So I will talk about this a little bit. From the inside of an open source project, it's very obvious how you contribute source code. From someone on the outside, it's a mystery. We often don't do a good enough job of holding people's hands online and saying, this is how you go from not contributing code to actually contributing code. I'll demystify it for you. You get involved. It's that simple. Well, how do you get involved? Usually you go to a project. So I work with a KDE project. And maybe I'm using a piece of KDE software. It's actually how I got involved with the project. It was around KDE 2.0, and there was a bug in the little dialog that allows you to run random commands. This one right here. And there was a bug in it. I wanted to fix that. So what I did is I went to kde.org, the project's website. I found the developer section. Almost every open source website, that's where you're going to want to start, will have a developer section. Click on the developer section. They will tell you, this is how to go get our source code. All open source projects, or virtually all, 99+%, keep their source code in what's called a revision control system. Most software developers are familiar with this. It's a way for, it's a place to put your code online and then allow multiple people to work on it simultaneously and then check in change by change by change. So you can actually track the evolution of the software by looking at the change log. They'll tell you, here's our repository here, here's how to get it. You get the software, you build it, you compile it, and then you modify it. And then you create a small diff file. If you're a developer, you probably know how to do that. Create a patch, and then you send that improvement to the project. If you're doing a large change, you probably want to get involved a little bit deeper. You probably want to subscribe to the mailing lists. And on the developer section of the website, they'll have, this is the mailing list to subscribe to. These are people to talk to. And if you're really going to get involved in the long term, it's good to get to know the culture of the project, because it's going to impact how you contribute, what their standards are, and whatnot. But this is true not just for writing code, but in general. And that's about it. A lot of people expect a more complex initiation, right? Like, I've actually had people send me resumes asking, I would like to join the KDE project, here's my resume. Okay. Sure, looks good. Where's the code, right? That's how you get involved. You get involved by simply getting involved. There's no application process besides actually participating. So people often expect something a lot more formalized than there usually is. But of course, writing code, as I said, we had 3 people here that know how to write code. There's fewer developers in this audience than there are non-developers, and that's typical. In fact, at a technical conference like this, there's less developers than there are non-developers. You go out into the street and you look at our total body of users, and we become a vanishingly small percentage of people. And as open source is becoming more and more mainstream, more popular, that ratio is becoming greater. So the question is, what about everyone else? Can the other 99 out of 100 people contribute to open source? Can they get involved with the open source ecosystem? Fortunately, the answer is yes, because I have 9 more ways. The next obvious thing, if you sat down, well, how can I contribute? Well, you can contribute financially. A lot of open source projects, including KDE, accept direct donations. That's usually how I end up being able to travel to places like this. People donate the means and the mechanism for me to travel there and meet with people. But it's also how we pay for our annual conventions. For the individual projects, we have a KDE Academy, which is our world conference. And we have a few hundred people that show up, and we have to house them, feed them, get a facility, and the whole bit. And that's all done through donation. We take those donations, we buy hardware so we can host mailing lists, we ensure that developers who need a new piece of hardware get it, etc. So you can do direct donation. And if you go to kde.org, as is typical of most, or many anyways, open source projects, we have a little thing that says donate to the project, support the project. You can purchase t-shirts and stuff, or you can just make a direct donation through PayPal or what have you. But that's not the only way to get finances to the projects. You can also make purchases, the good old capitalist way. You can go to a Novell, or you can go to another sort of company, whether it's Red Hat or even IBM, companies that are actually using open source. And you can purchase things from them, and they'll actually take some of that money and turn around. Now, not every company that sells and supports open source feeds some of that finances back into the projects. Not every company does. But you have companies such as MySQL AB. You have companies such as Trolltech, who actually enables me. They put a bunch of money into me to be able to allow me to work on KDE full time. You have companies around the PostgreSQL database. You have companies around a lot of the major projects that take their revenues, and a portion of that, instead of reinvesting into the business in a traditional closed source way, their investment to their business is in part ensuring more open source development happens. So when we make purchases of these from these companies, we're actually also helping support open source. So a lot of people go, well, I can just download it for free. I don't need to, why would I pay anything? Well, that's the beautiful thing about it. Those who, that's the, their limit, financial limit, great. You have accessibility, it's accessible to you. There is nothing that says you have to pay. But for those of us who actually do have the resources to do so, it makes sense because you're actually feeding back into that cycle. Was there a question here?
Yeah, I just wondered, is there anyone, say like a Dell or an Novell or an IBM or whatever, that would allow you to target a percentage of the purchase price of their product to be fed back into open source in some way, shape, or form?
So the question was, is there a company, is there a Dell, an IBM, whatever, that allows you to say, I want percentage of my purchase to go directly to an open source project? Most of those kind of companies don't allow you to do that, right? It's almost like a cost of business, and they flow it through, and they handle the numbers. However, you can either donate directly to a project, in which case it goes directly to that end. But there's a lot of companies. I mentioned MySQL, Trolltech, and a few others, Sleepy Cat for the embedded Berkeley DB. And these companies, their product is open source, right? So when you actually do business with them, you know that they're paying salaries, and they're paying, taking care of their shareholders if they have them and whatnot. But their developers are working on open source, and in a way, they're actually ensuring that there's full-time open source development happening. So by purchasing from, say, if you're looking for a MySQL database, and you actually purchase from MySQL, as opposed to Joe Blow down the street who isn't actually hiring any developers, right, to work on it, then you're actually knowing that some of your proceeds are going towards the improvement of that open source code.
Yeah, that's a different kind of proposition, though.
It is.
It just occurred to me that it might be a revenue stream into open source if a Dell, for example, if you're going to purchase a bunch of Dell servers and you're ordering without operating systems, is there, is that something that the open source community could enable within Dell for somebody to say, use a coupon code or something like that to provide to them?
That would be something that the vendors would have to step up. We already provide it. It's very easy to donate to us, and some companies do. Google, for instance, just donated to the KDE project $25,000 as a thank you and keep doing what you're doing. We love what you're doing. There are companies that do that. We make it very easy. we don't often turn money and participation away. When Google did the Summer of Code, wherein they contributed to university students to write code directly, but they also gave funds to the project for mentorship. And so those funds went directly to the project. Some of the funds went to the student who was doing the work, and everybody benefited. We also got T-shirts, hooray! But so there are when companies do step up and go, we'd like to do this. Google got thousands of proposals for Summer of Code projects, and every one that got approved, we gave at least one, often two mentors to the person. So we make it very easy for companies to come in. I think there's a lot of exploration to be done there on the part of industry. I think there's business opportunity. I think you can build entire business models off of that. I mean, that's really what Trolltech has done. That's what MySQL, that's what Sleepy Cat's done. It's what a lot of the Postgres people have done. It's what on and on and on have done. Build entire business models around the concept of trading off money for open source development. And the projects make it very easy. We're still, I think, in the embryonic stages with people like Dell and people like HP and IBM. We're a lot further than we were 10 years ago, but it's a new economic model, and we're still figuring things out. In some ways, I think Google is a leader. with their Summer of Code project, with their open donations and whatnot. They understand that to reap benefit from the open source community, they have to support it. And they're doing that not just by making nice ads or saying, we like open source and we use it, but actually investing financially. At the same time, I feel that this is kind of almost a cop-out. If you're saying, well, I'm supporting the open source community by I bought a box of SUSE. Well, great, that's great, but there are lots of other ways to become directly involved in addition to this, and ways that are often more meaningful, because we actually in the open source community rely on people being involved, whether you're paid or not paid to do so. We require a community of people to keep things floating. And I have 8 more reasons that have nothing to do with finances in this form and have nothing to do with writing code. Instead of giving your money to someone else to do open source development, consider creating an enterprise of your own. There are lots of companies around that are technological in bent, lots of individuals who don't have companies yet that are technologically minded. There's a huge amount of business opportunity around open source right now. In fact, if you read a lot of the media around the VC community right now, you'll see that open source plays are once again very hot because people start to figure out business models that work, and we have the proof that they work. Red Hat's doing quite well, for instance. Trolltech's doing quite well. So we have a few different business models. We know that they work. We're not stuck in that stage. And venture capitalists are going, oh, yeah, there's money to be made. They're not always wrong, just some of the time. And so when they start seeing a business opportunity, it usually is because in general there is one. And open source is a disruptive technology, which means which is another way of saying it's creating new opportunity in the marketplace. So, well, how does this help open source? Well, when you create a business, when you incorporate into your existing business an open source strategy for your clients, that enables you to bring funds in and then hopefully put funds back into open source development. So you don't always have to rely on the big companies or the established companies to do that funneling of funds for you. You can actually profit yourself and have a direct say in how things work. But there's a lot of other fun ways. You don't have to be a business person or an engineer. In the last 5-6 years, open source software, especially on the desktop, has become a lot prettier. And that's only partly because we software developers are so darn clever. Mostly, it's because of artists. I didn't make this slide template. I couldn't have made this slide template if I tried, probably. I'm not an artist. I draw here and there, I play some music, but at my core, I'm not, I wouldn't ever feel comfortable saying, I am an artist in a professional setting. We need artists. We need people to provide artwork that we can use for everything from presentations to icons. Icons are an interesting thing. They're very small pictures. The base KDE distribution, when you get just the base KDE desktop, and GNOME has about an equal amount, so these numbers are going to get scary. We ship over 1,000 different icons. That's 1,000 pieces of art that need to be done in a space that big. These are tiny little pieces of art. It's an art form unto itself. As you can see, I'm using desktop widgets here. And these are primarily, they look nice. They're functional, but they also look really nice. And desktop widgets that don't look nice don't get used. So artwork is something that we're constantly consuming. Every time we create a new function on a toolbar or on a button, we often need another little piece of art to go along with it to provide a visual representation of what it is and what it does. There are strong and growing art communities out there in the open source world. And the reason why they're strong and growing is because the product gets consumed at a remarkable pace. If you go to kde-look.org or gnome-look.org, they're both run by the same person, same website infrastructure, you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, I believe it's actually thousands at this point, that actually contribute art via those mechanisms. We have kde-artists.org, which is a collaboration area where developers can say, I need a piece of art to do, and then someone steps up and does the work. A good example of that is in our KDE Edutainment set of software. And in particular, this one application called Calcium, which is a chemistry application, teaches students what the the elements of the basic elements are. So as you can see, as I mouse over, oops, trackpads, hate them. As you mouse over the different elements in the periodic table, there's little pictures of each one. There's also, if you do calculation, you can actually build molecules, and there's little pictures for that. There's timelines where you can go and say, okay, well, when are things created? All right. There's states of matter, and there's a glossary as well. So that if you're not familiar with what something is, let's take a look and say, let's see if I have nothing on plasma. Let's say gas. No, nothing there. What kind of stuff do we have? I might actually not have the glossary installed. Oh, I do. Element. So a lot of these, not all of them, but a lot of these have artwork as well. And they're actually looking to build a complete set of artwork for every single entry. And this is really useful to the student. All this artwork has been donated by people, often through kd-artist.org. So if you're an artist, and that means whether you draw, you photograph, you're just good with Photoshop, there is a need for that involvement as well. Documentation. How many people here can write? I'm not asking well, I'm just saying, can you write? Most people can write. We're a pretty literate society. One of the key things for software and technology is documentation. Hopefully the user doesn't need to consult it every 5 minutes, but when they need that documentation, it becomes critical, because usually they're stuck. Usually they've tried everything they can think of, and now they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. Where does that documentation come from? How does it come out of thin air? It gets contributed by people. Now, if you thought the amount of artwork that goes into open source was impressive, you ain't seen nothing yet. We have man pages or manual pages for pretty much every single thing you can do in the command line. This is just book 2. There are 10 books. Quite a few just in that book. Of course, we also have developer documentation. We have application manuals. So if I want to learn how to use KPresenter, and let's do a search here. Beauty. Here is the KPresenter's user manual. That's the table of contents, and there's pages behind every one of those. Our documentation in open source, that looks really impressive, right? Wow, you've got all these different, all this documentation. That's really impressive. It is. We've got tons of documentation. Scarily enough, we're not even close to complete and comprehensive coverage. Now, if you can't write software, you can probably write in your mother tongue. We need documentation written. We need documentation that keeps up with software. I mean, software isn't a process that stops. Once it's mature, it does. But a lot, especially on the desktop, things are evolving at a rapid pace. And we software developers have this really bad habit of like changing stuff. We add new features, and we take this feature away, and then we redefine how that feature worked because we found out users didn't really like it that way, or it didn't really work very well. Or we had a brainwave and thought, here's a better way of doing it. And the documentation gets out of date. Right? So just as with Wikipedia, and you have people that are constantly involved with it, we need people writing documentation. Most projects actually have an entire sub-project dedicated to documentation writing. In KDE, we have an email list. We have a whole website, docs.kd.org. The email address for the KDE project is kd-doc-english. You can find this on our mailing lists and our developer site, and on the documentation site as well. And people show up and go, I'd like to write documentation for, Some people go, well, I don't know how to write documentation that looks like that. I don't know HTML. I don't know, and what's scary is we actually don't even use HTML. We use something much more complex called DocBook, which is an XML format specifically for documentation. They go, I don't know how to do that. Well, the good news is that there are people who do, and we accept just plain text. If you can just write plain text, hey, we'll take it and we'll DocBook it for you. So if you think that there's a barrier or a bar there, it's usually a lot lower than you think. So get involved. We really, really need documentation writers. Oh, and one of the interesting things about writing documentation, I've written documentation for a couple of applications, and it's amazing how much you learn about that program while you write documentation for it. It's actually a really great way to learn the technology better yourself as well. Yes?
Aaron, is it possible, is it easy for a developer on a project, small application, to integrate their documentation into the KDE Help Center, for example?
Yes, we actually have a standard way of doing that. If you look, the application manuals are the KDE ones. There's a KDE user manual. There's manuals for a few things. But then we've got Scroll Keeper, actually the GNOME documentation. We've got this traditional Unix documentation, the man pages, and more and more. A lot of distributions. I install from source code because this is my development station actually. But if you get it from, say, a Linspire or a SUSE or whatever, you'll notice other entries in this tree. And yeah, there's a standard way of providing your documentation that'll integrate automatically. And you can find that information on developer.kde.org as well. So now that we've got all this documentation in English, that helps all of us who speak English. It doesn't do people much good who don't speak English or don't understand it very well or just don't like reading English. This is another very low skill level required way to have a very high impact on open source, localizing it. Localizing software, the bulk of the work is in translation. How many people here speak a language other than English? 1, 2. Don't be shy. It's okay. All right, 2 people. We ship our software, KDE ships our software in over 50 languages fully translated. We've got about 80 if you count the ones that are partially translated. Most projects are the same. They ship in dozens of languages, whether it's Firefox or whether it's the command line. They actually run the command line. In fact, a lot of my friends in the projects I work on are from Europe. A lot of them are German. And whenever I switch, you go to their machine, I SSH into their machine to like on a server, and it's all in German. I have to switch the locale back to English so I can understand it. I'm actually getting to understand what a lot of the command line messages mean in German because of that. But the entire operating system is translated. And it's on-the-fly translations, by which I mean you can have Italian, English, French, German, Swahili. When I talked about in my presentation the first day about how they did those deployments in South Africa, and they had 5 different languages, one of which was a Dutch, English, African patois, and the other 4 are actually native languages. Those are all installed on every single machine. And when the person actually goes to the machine, they select what language they wish, and everything appears in that language. Well, that doesn't happen automatically. Unfortunately, we don't have the software yet to look at a piece of text and go, oh, in Chinese, that is this, and in German, it is that. This is actually done by hand. The good news is we have really great tools for this. In KDE, we've written an application called KBabel, K-B-A-B-E-L, and it is a translator's dream, I'm told. I don't do translation. I'm a monolinguist, unfortunately, but people who do translations absolutely love the program because it handles everything for them. They basically get a list of things they have to translate, they translate them, and as we as developers change it, it notifies them of the changes, and if it's similar, like if we just correct the spelling, it says, I think this is probably the same thing, and they can just click through yes or no whether it is or not. They hit Control-S, save the file, and email off to the project. Very easy way to do this. And you don't have to translate the entire thing. You could translate 10 pieces of text today. Now, a piece of text, the unit is, say, back, table of contents, forward, print, very small things. You could sit down and translate a few dozen a day, which is what most people do, and everywhere that string back appears is translated once you translate it once. So it's a very easy way. You can spend 10 minutes doing it. You could spend 100 hours over the course of a year, or many years, and this helps progress the translations. If you go to i18n.kde.org, that's internationalization. It's an I followed by 18 letters and an N. So i18n, i18n.kde.org, or i18n.gnome.org. Other projects have different websites. You go to those websites, and they'll list the different translation projects. And most of the translation projects are actually done in the native language. So if you're translating to Italian, there'll be a group of Italian people with an Italian language mailing list. So even if your English is, not your preferred mechanism for communication, you can get involved as long as you speak English and some other language. And that's how we've managed to get all these dozens of languages. In KDE, to do the full translation, you're looking at thousands, actually tens of thousands of individual strings. And I think that we've done that over 50 times, and we're only one project. You can also get involved by helping to create or maintain project infrastructure. What does that mean? Well, we need servers. Some people have server space, some people have servers, some people have system administration skills. We rely on bug databases, and those bug databases need to be groomed. We call it bug triage, where you go in and you say, yeah, that bug is real, yeah, that bug is real, oh, that bug is not, that's already been fixed. This one probably needs developer attention. Oh, this one's really important, I should elevate that. That's part of our infrastructure. We need those things to happen to make the projects move forward. So we've got this whole broad range of infrastructure, from web servers to mail lists to source code repository administration to bug triage, writing websites, maintaining websites. There's a whole gamut of project infrastructure. If you think of a traditional technology business, we actually have, outside of the sales side of it, virtually all the pieces that they have. We just don't call them the same. We don't have the person who is the system administrator that works in IT department. They are system administrator that works in the project. That's about the only difference. We just call their office something else. Being an advocate of an open source project is another way to be involved. It's interesting, as we've evolved as a community, we've often looked at, well, if you're not writing source code, you're not really in the project. That was, years and years ago. But that was very much an attitude that a lot of people held in the open source community. And then we were like, well, no, you know what, art is important too, and yeah, documentation is important, translation, and so we started to expand the meaning of what it meant to be in the project. Well, these days, most projects also have an advocacy and marketing arm. People who do almost nothing but advocate to people outside of the project what the project does. It's a combination of education. This is what we have. This is how you can use it. This is how you can get it. They advocate the benefits of it. How many people have heard of Spread Firefox? All right, so about half the people. Not bad. This was a community-driven project that has been ridiculously successful. They've done everything from take out full-page ads in national newspapers to spray painting in chalk the Firefox logo on the side of university buildings, to handing out stickers, to attending conventions like this one and speaking about the project, to writing up press releases for new releases and making sure they get in the hands of reporters. So there's all kinds of different advocacy avenues. And again, it's something that almost anyone can do if they're interested in the project. If you go, wow, I really like what these people are doing with this database. I think they're doing a great job with it. I'm going to go tell the world about PostgreSQL. PostgreSQL has an active and thriving marketing and advocacy sub-project, as do most major projects now. So you contact them, you say, what can I do? How can I advocate it? Something that is starting to happen more and more are the local advocacy groups. KDE just started a group in India called KDE India, imaginatively enough. We also have KDE Netherlands and KDE France, but we just started KDE India. And it's a small group of people that are going to be advocating KDE use and development and involvement and whatnot in India from the cultural perspective of the Indian populace, because, well, that's who is doing it. And when I say KDE set it up, the real truth of the matter is a man named Pradipto who is really interested in KDE and said, actually at work, he uses it every day as a software developer. And he felt, wow, I've gotten a lot out of this. I want to give something back. And he didn't really have any more energy to write software. He didn't really want to do that. He's not an artist. He didn't really get into documentation or translation. He decided to get into advocacy. And so he helped orchestrate the formation of this group that's now quite active. And it's helping advocacy within the area. Now, here in Hawaii, do we have a local advocacy group for open source? We have HOSEF. That's one of them, you bet. People who are actually helping coordinate this entire thing. This is advocacy. We have HOSEF. Do we have ones for individual projects or individual applications? Probably not. Do we have for specific types of users? Maybe not. Does the average person in this area know about open source? Do they know what it can do for them? Do they know what it means? If the answer to any of those questions is no, then that's a sign there's advocacy needs here. And it's, again, a very, very simple way of getting involved. And you can, through the main projects, actually go to them and say, how do I do this? And they'd be more than happy to help you actually figure out how to do effective advocacy in your area. So if you're not an artist, not a documenter, think about advocacy. Now we're getting to the traditional stuff again. Open source, before the rise and advent of companies that were monetizing it, open source grew and was supported by other users. You didn't go and get a support contract from Red Hat or IBM or whomever. You'd go on Usenet. You would join a mailing list. You would go on IRC, and you'd say, I have a problem. I've noticed that. This thing is not working, and I can't get this to, how do I do that? And another user, who might also be a developer, but not always, sometimes just a very knowledgeable user, would write back rather quickly and go, oh, well, this is the problem, or I need more information. Any help troubleshoot the problems? Someone says, how do I need to set up a replicated DNS server. How do I do that? I need to do presentations, but I want to use open source software. How do I do that? What's remarkable is that all the way through all the monetization of open source, right, when companies came along and started offering services and support and start making industry around it, that aspect of open source has not gone away. It's changed slightly, partly because there's a lot more people involved that don't have quite the guru level. The guru ratio is dropping, but that's a problem with success. You get more average people involved. But the good news is users still support other users a lot. We have Kubuntu CDs in the other room. And if you go to the Ubuntu project forums, you will see a fearsome number of postings. People have questions, and people answer. And answers come in minutes on that forum. Gentoo is another project operating system that actually has a similar set of forums. But the Ubuntu project is really interesting. I mean, one of the developers said that if he's not careful, he could spend his whole day simply trying to keep up and failing to keep up with the message boards. So if you have a question, it can get answered. Now, imagine yourself on the other side of that. You figured out how to do something very tricky, something very difficult, something non-obvious. Someone's probably going to have that exact same question. Maybe you've documented it. Maybe you went into documentation, as we talked about in one of the other earlier slides, and you've documented that, so now future people actually can look it up online or through their help center. But maybe you'll go online and subscribe to a mailing list, and someone will ask that question, you go, I know how to do that. That support is critical, because if someone's using open source and they don't know how to do something, chances are they're going to stop using it. But that, when they have a question, someone answers it, it increases their feeling that there's a community around it. It increases their loyalty to the technology, and enables them to actually use it, which is kind of why we're all here, right, is to get stuff done. So supporting other users is definitely a way to get involved. I mentioned online forums. I mentioned mailing lists. We also have an IRC network called Freenode, irc.freenode.net. You fire up your IRC client and go online. And there's channels there for every single, practically, open source project. And most of them are user-centric. We've got both developer and user channels on there. So if you want to sit in a chat room for a while and field real-time questions, which can often be really fun. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You know, you have a half hour, on a weekend or whatever, and you go online, you answer 3 or 4 questions. It is really quite satisfying. Perhaps one of the most important ways to get involved with open source is to ask for it and to use it. You go, well, that's kind of lame. I mean, how is that being involved? Well, it's because if you don't ask for it, nobody knows that there's a demand for it. And if no one knows there's a demand for it, people aren't going to get involved. If nobody uses it, there's nothing to be involved with. We don't write software into a vacuum. We write software so that we can get stuff done. Well, you know, I do anyways. I like to think most of us do. It's fun doing it. It's an enjoyable thing to do, but I don't, you know, write software and then delete it off my hard drive once it's done because, well, accomplish that one. And as we use it, that grows the pool of people that can get involved in all those other 9 ways. That's where our documenters come from. That's where our artists come from. That's where our software developers come from. It's where our business people come from. It's where the customers for our business people come from. If you view the concept of a pyramid, I mean, we know pyramid type structures from everything from food chains to our own dietary needs, right? To sales. You know, you have your potential, and then you qualify some of those people, and then you talk to some of those people, and you know, figure out the ones that actually might want it, and then you close a sale. And it's the same thing with open source. We have a pyramid, right, where we've got potential users, actual users, and then it's kind of a multi-headed hydra from there, people who get involved in different ways, in these 9 different ways. Without that use, we have no wellspring. Something that happens with open source is people will get involved for short periods of time, perhaps because they are, you know, taking downtime off of work. They're on sabbatical, or maybe they got fired. Maybe they're between classes at university. You know, they've got the summer off. Maybe they found it and they go, wow, I'm really excited. And that lasts for a period of time. And so there's a really high rate of churn in the open source community. Always has been, probably always will be. You'll find people that have been there for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but the overwhelming majority of people are involved for a short period of time and contribute a small amount of work. And if we don't keep that cycle going, well, that river will just dry up. And soon there won't be any open source. Fortunately, we have lots of people using it enthusiastically. We have lots of people getting involved. And so instead of that river drying up, it's actually growing and growing. And we've got a torrent now where once there was just a small creek. So don't think that the use of it, and the public use of it especially, let people know, is important, because that is our wellspring. So, open discussion, questions, comments. And I hope that everyone goes away with at least one thing that they can, you know, go home and go, I can do that. And even if you contribute just a small amount, that adds to that torrent. That's how it's happened. Yes?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Advocacy doesn't have to be like a really big thing. It can be a casual, like, mention or a note from a friend of like, hey, how do I do such and such? Say, hey, well, you can go buy this, or you can just go download this. And just getting that first step of people realizing
Exactly.
there's something available, you can use it. Like, I've had like family say, hey, I need Photoshop, or I need Photoshop Pro, or whatever. Well, there's this great thing called Begin, because it's free. You can get it and start using it. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, and that, yep.
Just name dropping doesn't hurt at all.
No, it doesn't. In fact, that was really the core, and still is to a large extent, of Spread Firefox, right? It's grassroots. What can you do? And most of the things are simple and small. And yeah, it's just, hey, tell them, yeah, when someone says, I need this, here's something you can go do. I've still got a few CDs of Kubuntu left here. That's another great way of doing it. You know, I was thinking if I need to, you know, something to run my web server on. Here's something to do it on. But yeah, just the mentioning, it's a very good point.
I just discovered Linux. I think I want to put up my own Linux site. I think I'm going to come out with my own distribution too.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah, and I mean that's the expression of raw enthusiasm, right? I found this thing, it's so amazing, I'm going to go do a whole thing all on my own. And that's why it's called getting involved versus doing something on your own, right? And yeah, the enthusiasm is great, and we in the community have a responsibility to, when someone says that, to, you know, kind of point them in the direction of ways to get involved with things that are already happening. Because at this point, I mean, if you roll back the clock like 10 years, there were a lot of things that weren't being done. These days, there's very few things that aren't being done. But yeah, that enthusiasm can find other channels, and that's really as mentors in the community. Yeah, we really need to help those people find more useful ways to spend their time.
I need to make my own specialized distribution for people who have velour curtains on their windows.
Go for it. The velour curtain using community is large. You'd be surprised. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is scratching your own itch and from your own perspective. Yeah, and there's nothing really wrong with that either.
But can you show me, the only problem is I'm not very good at like programming and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or writing documentation. So could you guys help me out and do the
Mm.
I make this as a joke, but
Yeah,
I get this
all the
email
time.
100 times
Yeah.
a week.
Where people, and the kind of the situation posed was someone who wants to do something but really wants you to do the work for them. Yeah, by we I mean you.
It's not necessarily bad for ideas to come from non-technical people.
No, and not at all.
It is not a discussion.
Yes.
It's sort of generally perceived to be not such a workable idea. You can have that discussion, but I would shy away from saying no.
Yeah,
Time is fine, but your idea stinks.
ideas are great. The problem with ideas is that they're you can't eat them. An idea for a great piece of software does not make a great piece of software. So while input, and you notice I didn't mention sending as one of the ways you can involve sending ideas to software to your local open source developer. Yeah, I get a lot of those emails too. But yes.
However, tempering, I agree with what you said, tempering that, the people who write software normally don't understand the problem space of people who don't just use software. So in order to be successful running an accounting application, you have to understand accounting to some extent. In order to,
I don't think you're a successful software developer if you don't study your users. I think a lot of people masquerade as successful software developers, but they're not because they never pay attention to their users. So I think that, as you say, paying attention to your users is important and vital. But I don't necessarily see that as input from the users as a way to get involved.
what I'm saying
Yeah.
is maybe applying to these ideas that come from left field may actually be an opportunity.
Well, they might, but what I see over and over again is I see, Robin, I have a SourceForge project, that's the email I get, and it's a great project, and it's going to produce $100 computers that have no boot up top. And,
Won't you please mention your own Slack talk?
yeah, because you see,
That's
it's my,
not good.
no, it's my project, yeah, correct. Oh, his project. Yeah, the only thing is, I don't know how to design hardware, I don't know how to do it, I don't know how to write the document, I don't know how to do the marketing, and I'm not sure really how to do this at all.
Yeah, and to, yeah.
My project.
And to that, I often say two things. Number one, you probably do have skills that are applicable somewhere. You're selling yourself short. I think everybody can write documentation. I think anybody could do advocacy. I think anybody can use it. And those are ways to contribute. But to get other people, but to expect other people to do your work for you, and that's the division line between a good suggestion and uselessness. Feedback is a natural part of the life cycle of software. That's when I said, we need people to triage bugs. Notice I didn't really say we need people to report bugs. We don't got no problems there. We have bugs coming in all the time. We have more bugs being contributed than we can deal with, to be honest. The feedback cycle, the volume, the level of volume from our users has grown in lockstep with our number of users. Our number of users is in the millions these days. So you can imagine they've got a big Marshall amp kind of sound to them. It's a deafening roar. As developers, we need to listen to that, weed it out. But that's part of the process. Getting involved means doing the work, whether that is advocacy or documentation or using it or actually running software. That's getting involved. The input cycle is just part of the process. Yes.
I think Robin and Jim are probably both alluding to something much earlier than the stage where you actually have a project.
Mhm.
You've got people with ideas for something, for something that could be done, that could provide useful, programs to help a segment of the community. But they don't have a clue. They don't have any of these skills or don't think they do. They don't have a clue of how to hook up and get something off the ground.
Well, that's why I do presentations like this one. People that don't have a clue how to write the software, if they want it, can help get it going by contributing resources to it. We get people all the time that come to existing projects even and say, it would be a really great idea. It would be awesome if your presentation software could broadcast, over, if I have a wireless card, so that other people can be viewing it on their own laptop while you're presenting it. That'd be really cool. You kind of have a server for your presenter. It's like, that's a neat idea. Who's going to do it? And yeah. Well, even earlier, when you say I have an idea for a brand new project, even then, ideas don't actually result in anything. What results in something is getting involved. And it doesn't always mean writing the software, right? But it certainly means getting involved. And that is an issue, and why I really want to talk about 10 active things to do. Anybody can sit down and think of ideas. Some will be good, some will be less good. But that's something that's fairly easy to do. But at the end of the day, even if you have the most brilliant ideas in the world that are going to, solve world hunger through software, I mean, if you could come up with that idea, that'd be great. But then imagine if nobody got involved. And that's the issue. So the question is, how do we get people with ideas involved?
I'll tell you what I'm telling you now. I'm saying, you know what you got to do? You have this wonderful idea, let's call it user limits. You
Not while I'm drinking. You kill me.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was an inside joke. But yeah, go ahead.
I think that if you guys go do this now. I'll
Yep.
But aside from that, what I tell people, that's a little different. I tell people, go find something you can do on an existing project.
Mm-hmm.
Before you try to become a shining light and have people flock to your beacon, and you start accumulating your huddled masses.
So what Robin said was, he often recommends people to get involved with an existing project, and that's all about getting involved, right? Getting involved, not.
Too many people who want to run projects.
Everybody wants to rule the world, right? Isn't that what they say?
Not true.
Yeah.
You see the vice president? You ever seen him? You see my card? Does it say vice president on it? Think I could beat him?
Yeah, that's because you've got experience. You know what it means to rule a world, whether it's a project or not. And most people who've done it every time they do it again, they go, "Why am I doing this? I must be insane." But yeah, most people, when the enthusiasm turns into I've got a great idea and you can go do it.
So there are really two different things here. One is, people who want other people to do the work for them. And other people who just, they're a user and they have an unmet need.
Yep.
And developers, typically are not users of all, they don't really represent all of the potential users. So they don't have, in many cases, a clue as to what kind of needs are unmet. How do you bring those people together?
I know that many years ago, I think when I was getting going, email us. I made some very humble suggestions about some things that I thought would be useful for what I call non-technical users, and others are now calling non-technical users too. And a guy I'll codename to obscure his identity, Eric.
His last name rhymes with almond. His last name rhymes with almond?
His wife's name is Kathy.
Yeah.
That's right here. And likes my wife, but that's another thing. This guy told me in great detail why people, if people wanted to use a word processor or something along these lines on Linux, first of all, they should learn to write their own. And I pointed out, I don't think so. And second, he said that you don't need a word processor. Everybody should use VI. And later, due to this mythical Eric person I'm making up, he actually some very he was very nasty to me, extremely nasty. And we're talking about really obscure Heinlein essay references.
Mm-hmm.
It actually became a thread of its own because he and I are better at knowing obscure references to Heinlein works you haven't read than almost anybody. And that grew into a separate artwork. But the end result was he got disabused because of this Kathy woman who basically is a lawyer. I said, I'm not going to learn the program so that I can produce legal documents.
Mm-hmm.
And she had, for some reason, some sway with this guy. Anyway, I started using ADE about that.
I'd like to, yeah. Well, I'd like to answer the question first, and then I'd like to dispel a myth. But I'm going to answer the question first. How do we bring the needs of the users together with the developers? And this is going to sound really repetitive, by getting involved. For instance, usability, which is often what people are thinking when they think about the needs of the users. There's a project called openusability.org. And this project is not driven. Novell recently released betterdesktop.org, which is a bunch of videos they made of people using the software. Interesting. We definitely gleaned some important information from that. But openusability.org are usability experts. People who know how to bring users and developers together, interpret the needs of the users, and then turn around and tell us stupid developers what they're actually looking for in ways we understand. That's usually the disconnect. They are helping address that issue of how do we bring users and developers together. The real question is, how do we get developers to write software that's appropriate for users and specific sets of users? And they're helping us do that by saying, well, who are your users? Okay, and give me your idea. I'm going to go test it. I'm going to go do tests on 50 different people. And then I'm going to come back. I'm also going to apply my expertise in usability to let you know that when you put a button up here, another button down here, and there's a correlation between them, that's not a good idea. You should put them closer together. And so bring from the sciences of usability as well as actually testing with users. This is happening by getting involved. It's not happening by changing developers, and I hear this a lot. Well, developers need to be more, sensitive to users' needs. That's kind of like saying, sharks to stop eating other fish. And it's not going to happen. And not because sharks are bad. It's because that's what they do. It's how they work. They are designed to work that way. Software developers write software. We don't have, we're not usually, and I'm going to speak in broad strokes, you'll find exceptions to this rule. But generally, we're not really good at listening to the cacophony, picking out individual voices, and then finding the statistical meaning of those voices, and then turning around and creating something that fits those voices.
No, they hear the thing that sounds friendly, they say, I can do that, so do it.
If we listen at all. Now the myth part I want to dispel is this concept that software developers, especially open source developers, are not sensitive to the needs of users. If that were true, this would not exist. There is not one person on this project that needs KDE. Think about that for a second. We like it, we enjoy it,
Well, you know what
but
happened?
yes.
I'll tell you how that happened. And this goes back again, 'cause I wrote the article and I got slammed. Is when people were talking about scratching their own itch, and I mentioned the difference between masturbation and intercourse, between writing poetry that you shove in a drawer and nobody else reads it.
Yes.
What has happened is an awful lot of open source development has gone from doing it because I want it, but now I'm doing it for the applause of the crowd.
Yep.
And that works.
It does. Do you know why KDE was started? Does anybody know what the original impetus for writing the first free software desktop was? No, actually GNOME did not exist. GNOME was invented because they didn't agree with the politics of KDE. But why did KDE get started? Why did someone start writing a good desktop? Anybody? A guess. Just take a wild guess. No. It was Matthias's girlfriend who couldn't use his Linux computer, and he liked Linux. He didn't want to install something else and support something else and whatnot. And he had his girlfriend. He wanted her to be able to use the same stuff he used. But then he realized, you know what? FEWM to black box, a window manager command line. Yeah. No, she wanted a web browser and a word processor, not Vi. And, she wanted those things. And so he went, okay, fine. What we're going to do is I'm going to go write a whole bunch of software for you. And then, actually, I bet you there's a lot of other people with girlfriends. In fact, there's a lot of people with parents and siblings. In fact, there's a lot of business people. I bet you there's a lot of other people out there that want this too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rally the troops, and we're going to do something. And at the time, it was just insane. It's like, we're going to start out from nothing, and we're going to write an entire desktop. I mean, everything. Not just a desktop. We're going to give them email and editors and word processors and calculators and you name it. We're going to give it all to them. 4 million lines of code later, we have KDE, almost 10 years since then.
You know where that came from? It even came
Exactly. Katie is not the only project that does this. This is actually much, 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 much more common. The problem that we have, and the users turn around and go, well, it's obviously because the developers don't care. What it is that we need other people to get involved whose specialty is finding out how to take the needs of users, measuring them, translating that, and then giving it in a usable form for us developers. The good news is this is starting to happen. And it's not happening by users yelling at us louder. It's not happening by having more users join the cacophony. It's happening because people are getting involved who do exactly that. That's why getting involved is important as opposed to trying to figure out why it doesn't work. Get involved in it and you fix it. Yes?
I still submit that earlier in the process, than when there are any identifiable users, you just have an individual who has an idea, or maybe, you know, something that he does in his, as a form of employment or enjoyment or whatever, that, you know, that has an unmet
Need. Mm-hmm.
something that could be satisfied by a
Yep.
piece of software.
Right.
But he doesn't have a clue as to how to make that happen. And so where does that, he's not really even a user yet because there's nothing to use.
Mm-hmm.
But he has, you know, there's something that, there's a potential user, I guess. You know, how do they connect up?
You get involved. Yeah, I'm sorry to keep saying it, but it's how it works. Yeah, you know, no, I understand. It's how do you communicate your need? I need this application that isn't there yet. This program to do. You know, I need something to. You know, I wish there was an open source mechanism to deal with the automation of my factory floor.
I'm supporting 2 projects out of my pocket, not company.
Yeah. And this actually, another example. Okay, here's a good example that specifically speaks to what you're talking about. Quanta. It's probably the best right now, open source, HTML, website, PHP, whatever, creator, editor. It's been supported in large part by a man who sells cat stuff. He sells stuff for cats, little toys. He grows catnip in greenhouses and sells it. He calls himself a feline cat drug dealer. And he's been supporting this project. Now, why? Because he does all of his business online, which means he needed a website, which means he needed someone to create the website. And so he's been doing that. And he's actually had a great influence in the software and actually what needs to be done because he's directed finances, and not a huge amount because he actually pays people in Eastern Europe to do it, open source developers there, which is their needs are not as high as they are here. But he also makes sure they get to conferences and, you know, and whatnot. He does fundraising as well outside of his business. That's how he got involved. He helped bring the project together. We talked about creating and maintaining project infrastructure. He made sure they had a website. He made sure that they got involved with the KDE project so we could host their project. He did all of this business management kind of stuff, which he's really, really good at. kittyhooch.com, by the way. If you ever want to go and get some good stuff for your cats, it is good stuff. And want to support open source, right? By donating finances and making purchases. It's not always just software purchases. Every time you buy a bit of Kitty Hooch from kittyhooch.com, you actually support open source software development. Crazy, but that's how that's how it goes. And so he got involved, and he had a need that he couldn't meet himself, and he has a vision for it, right, as a user. And how he got that done was getting involved. Now, it's interesting. If he had sat back and said, I wish someone would write this, and, you know, here's my great idea, and even done a big sketch and everything, if he didn't get involved in some way, the odds of it happening were dramatically diminished. So you can get involved either by going to Red Hat and saying, we need this software, and here's the actual need, and here's how we're going to make sales. Or, like Kitty Hooch, you can make it happen, right? So there's always a level of getting involved. Nothing will actually happen without involvement. It's a very different way of doing things. We live in a consumerist society where we have been lied to, and we've been told that all you do is you open your wallet, you take out this green stuff, you give it to someone else, and magically you get a glass or you get something else. Yeah, there's people running for it. Yeah. And that's not true. It's not that simple. But we've been told it's that simple, that we consume, therefore we are. And that all we have to do is sit back as consumers. And they've divorced us from the concept that, you know where that money came from? I worked for it. I got involved in the economy. Now, there are people who have removed themselves from the economy because they've gotten very rich, and they no longer need to be involved unless they want to. But most of us, the overwhelming majority of us, are involved in the economy. We make money the hard way. The overwhelming majority of us, 99+%. The hard way? You wouldn't know, man. You're a yachty. You hang out on a boat, for God's sake. Yeah, you go to work every day on the high seas. But no. That sucks. But yeah, we are involved in our economy. There's this mythos that we're not. So what happens is people get involved, come to a ecosystem where we don't promulgate that myth, that lie, that you can get something without being involved. And we actually expose the process, and then people are confused because they don't make the connection in their heads anymore. When you buy something, you were involved in an economic transaction that started probably months before, right? And it goes on in a cycle. We're involved. So I wish I could say, yeah, you can come up with an idea and boom, it happens. That's a consumerist concept, and that actually doesn't even happen in our consumer society. So getting involved is the key.
So I think we're getting closer to an answer to my question.
Mm-hmm.
My mind anyway is that the way that of hooking unmet needs up with, some developers who can meet that need and all of the other parts of it. Is if somebody asks a question,
Mm-hmm.
that's, I think this is a great idea, but I'm not a developer, I'm not a documentation writer, how can I make this happen, is to tell that person.
Well, maybe not with Aaron, but I'm telling you that I'm actually, in basic, on my old neighbor, the behaviorist professor, saying, I need video screen capture for some of the work I did. Okay. Right now, the only efficient video editing and screen capture tools that don't take whole racks of boxes are in basically Windows. So through what I mean, not even anything good for Mac. So I'm funding, not funding, I got $50 here, $50 there, but I'm, buying little bits of stuff
You're helping to fund.
for people who are trying to do things that may or may not result in something that, in the tools that I need that have driven me back to using that.
Yeah. What's interesting is that you, as you say, you're not funding it, but you're doing $50 here, $50 there. This is the strength of a cooperative involvement-based economy or ecosystem. Is unlike when you purchase a glass, you have to pay the full price yourself. We're all sharing the cost of the factory, if you think about it, right? And the same thing, whenever we get involved, we actually share costs. An example of user-driven design, and a very trivial one. The clock. And Katie, not so many years ago, you could have more than one clock, but you couldn't have more than one time zone showing. You flick the time zone in one, it would flick it in the other one. Okay, we fixed that, because travelers, this is all driven by people who travel a lot. That wasn't me. I just kept getting input. While it's getting closer, it kind of works, and people who do business in a lot of time zones. So like financial advisors and whatnot. So they said, no, we need two different time zones. And then people who travel a lot, they said, I needed to remember which time zone I was on, not just the local time zone, because when I'm in Hawaii, every time I turn on my computer, I want to see Honolulu time. Right. Now, remember, when we first made this clock, it did none of this. So I went, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Then someone said, you've got these really nice little balloon pop-ups now. What really annoys me is I have to scroll through the clock and actually see every time zone I've selected. It'd be really cool if I could just put it over and see all my time zones, because when I'm on the phone with someone in London, I like to know what time it is in New York without doing the mental math while I'm talking to them, so I know whether or not I can phone them or not. Okay, fair enough. There it is. The communication cycle does work, right? These people got involved, though, by helping that, getting that communication out. So I'm not saying it never happens, right? The communication is sometimes all that's necessary. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you'll put out an idea and say, I wish I had an application to help automate my factory floor with open source software, and someone will go, that's a darn good idea, and run off and do it. and that is part of the process that happens all the time. But that process is actually reliant on someone at some point getting involved.
Right.
And you have control, we all have control over what we're involved in. And you can't really force me to get involved in something, right? It's the beauty of free will. But you can control what you get involved in, right? And so if you get involved in even some small way or some large way, you can actually have a direct impact and influence on what happens and what comes out of it. So I also don't want to make it look like, oh, unless you actually actively spend time on open source, you'll never see anything you ever wanted. Again, otherwise you wouldn't have the software. And that feedback cycle does work. But yeah, generally, there's always a place to be involved. And we are going through a learning cycle here as we get more and more people involved in the community, because we're not used to, most of us anymore, in actively, consciously participating in things, right? That's why software developers go, well, how do I contribute code? How do I get involved in something? Because they're used to getting hired and then made to work on something, right? You shall do this now from 8 until 4. And a half an hour break in the middle of the day, and you're working this weekend too. They're used to being told these things, right? And that whole concept of owning, again, our participation, and us being the masters and saying, this is what I participate in and how I participate in it. And that's they're saying that freedom cannot be given, it must be taken, right? And this is one of the social changes that's happening with open source, is people are relearning how to take it upon themselves to define how they're involved. There are less predefined mechanisms that you must do. There's a lot of predefined mechanisms that you can do, and you get to choose. But there's always involvement. Yeah, there's always involvement at some level. I would love to see a working society or a working complex social organism of any kind that really works without anybody being involved. And if anybody says television, exactly, someone has to produce television. Yeah, and even
The process of producing television is so corrupt.
sure. Oh, I agree. I often say, think about the dictators. When you're a dictator, it's all on your shoulders. Whoever thinks about them. But yeah, there's always involvement. Yeah, we're democratizing that too.
We are. I'm helping some, local community college, kids, wannabes on waters kind of kids, and I do some narration for them and help them get their scripts together.
Even Mogan says that he planned in about 2015 to make an argument in front of the Supreme Court that broadcasting is unconstitutional. So,
Who was that?
Even Moglen? Yeah.
Real good speaker.
Yeah.
If you're going to speak, he's one of those, as they say, he could be the vocal mechanism.
Yeah, he's a law professor, very well respected. He's the fellow who drafts the GPLs, the GPL licenses, from a legal perspective.
He's Stallman's
Yeah.
lawyer, okay?
Stallman's lawyer, among other things. And it's
I don't get it then. Why would broadcasting be unconstitutional?
He's not talking about broadcasting per se, but even I have had this conversation a couple of times about the licensing.
Oh, yeah.
And the use of our public spectrum for by Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
yeah. If you want to read another person that's getting into this argument today and not waiting for 2015, Lawrence Lessig, and the concept of Creative Commons and rational and reasonable limitations to intellectual property.
it's not that Mogan is waiting for 2015 to make the argument. He's going to take that
That long to, yeah.
together, and he's supporting stuff together. He and Leslie are actually very well aligned.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand Creative Commons. I'm licensing more and more of my stuff that I have control over. It is going out.
How many people here have heard of Creative Commons and know what it is? There's a few people. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Creative Commons is Lawrence Lessig. What it's about is, okay, I produce content for a living. Me and Metallica.
Can you get on the mic?
Yeah. All right. Me and Metallica and everybody else. Me and people that belong to RIAA, and all those people. A lot of my work is copyrighted. If you go and you start picking up pages from OSTG and you put it framed in your sites with commercial advertising on it, depending on how we feel, we might send you a polite note saying, excuse us, don't do that. Or I might call Linda Chen, corporate attorney. And then she will send you, and we do it my way, which is we just send you a bill because you are using our work. We bill you for it. Hey, if you're a nonprofit or a student publication, you want to pick up this stuff, and you ask us, we tend to say sure. Or if you're in Spanish and you want to make Barra Punto, which is /dot in Spanish, we would give you a license to reprint everything on /dot translated with a request and a suggestion that within a few years you get it so it's at least 60% native content instead of picking up from /dot. So y'all do your own thing. And they've done that, by the way, and they pick up 20% from us now. It's 80% theirs. Yay! That's spread the meme, you know. So what Creative Commons is about is an attempt to control somewhere between the press release I got yesterday morning from these people saying, we have this great new way to protect creators' rights. And it's a USB stick that a Rolling Stones album was released under. I said, sure, do a /dot interview. I'm sure our users will be interested. They're dumb enough, okay. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is let's give it away. Let's give it all away. And I know and then get beat up a little bit for like writing books that sell for money. And I always tell people, you know, that I'm happy to stop doing that, but my mortgage payment is $1,070 a month. How much are you willing to donate to help out? Never hear from them again. So the Creative Commons is the attempt to go somewhere between there. Some rights reserved, it says, and there's several different Creative Commons licenses. The one I'm using for public distributed stuff is the, I'm trying to remember the name of it. You got it there somewhere? The share and share alike license. And what that basically says is I'm putting out videos on the web. When I get home next week, I'm going to put up a video that will tell Windows users, show them a little CD creator program they can download very easily so they can burn Linux CDs, bootable CDs. Nobody ever tells them how to do that, so I will. And it'll be watermarked with my domain, roblimo.com, through which I sell books for money, things like that. And my terms of distribution as the share alike license is you can give it away, knock yourself out. Don't sell it. If you sell it, I want a piece of the action, which I think is fair, don't you? In other words, I'm saying if you want to give my work away, go right ahead. But if you want to sell my work, why are you profiting from it when I am not?
Yeah, the problem, the reason why this started was not because of a belief that intellectual property is wrong, but that because there were not enough, there wasn't enough of a stated reason for the protections we have, people were increasingly abusing them. The copyright was originally designed, was originally enacted to protect people like Robin from people like his publishers. Because what publishers were doing was people would write something and they just publish it, and not give they didn't have to give the artist anything. So
well, if they did they'd give a small fee.
Yeah.
That's called work for hire.
Right, and so there was it wasn't fair and just. So they decided this whole thing called copyright. And the person who creates it should have property rights.
Who creates it?
They're right. Now the problem is that these days the publishers have figured this out, and now they own the copyrights, and now only by contract, right? So. Which virtually, yes, which people do because they control broadcast and whatnot. So then Disney comes along, right? He makes this little mouse, and it gets really popular. Now nobody says, you know what, you have to let everyone use that mouse forever. However, we used to have a reasonable length
37 years.
to a copyright, and then it would expire.
Or the life of the author.
Well,
No,
not originally.
no,
Not originally. The life of the
came later.
author came later.
And then it became the life of the corporate parent that bought it from
And
it, which is
that's
forever.
and that was why they actually maneuvered life of the author, because then they knew that if a corporation's a person, then they could make a confluence.
All right, I have a
And
question
so-
for you, Mr. Seigo,
Sure.
for $74,000
Sure.
in genuine play money.
Right?
What American animated film company
Right.
has used more out-of-copyright public domain works than any other?
For every single, except for I think 3 of their animated long films, Disney has used public domain stories and reworked them. Imagine if Shakespeare was still locked up. Now, what they've done, here's my question to you. Can you use Mickey Mouse unless you're Disney or pay a licensing fee to them?
No.
Right.
To clarify the question, because if I create clear parody, I can't.
You can use clear parody, but this is one of the problems that's happening. Is there's a thing called, and what you're referring to with parody is a thing called fair use.
Yeah.
Now, fair use is being attacked. And what's interesting is it costs an amazing amount of money to fight a fair use case. To say someone comes up and they go, well, you know what, you're actually using Mickey Mouse. Not in I don't think that's parody.
How about Mickey
Or,
Penis?
or Mickey, yeah. Or it appears in the
I've
background.
used Mickey Penis as a character. Be nice.
Yeah. And
Not
here-
everything I've written has been about Linux people.
Now, this is how ridiculous it gets. Let's say we're filming here, right? And I happen to put Mickey Mouse up in a video. And we film that, and we turn that video of me talking with Mickey Mouse in my presentation. Maybe it's just playing in the background, not even part of my presentation. But you can see it in the video. We then make a DVD of that, and we sell it. And you can, in the little corner, you can see Mickey Mouse playing. You actually have to go and get consent from Disney and whoever owns that IP, or else they may come and say that's not fair use. And that's ridiculous, isn't it? Well, it's not even part of the presentation. Some person in the background wasn't paying attention.
Who's going to distribute?
Yep.
Local for the two guys that don't live here
Right.
anymore. If you drive down the street in Oahu, you'll run by a fire station normally. If you look in front of the fire station almost any month, there's this collection of cartoon characters advocating fire safety.
Right.
Change the battery to your smoke detector. Some of them are Disney characters. Some of them are Warner Brothers characters. And I'm here to bet anybody $100 a day that there was no licensing involved.
Probably
I
not.
don't know why. It's weird. It's the why. I love it.
Plumbers do that a lot. Although I've noticed one thing around North America, I haven't seen it too much in Europe, but for whatever reason, plumbers love to put comic book characters on their vans. I've seen this all over North America. It's crazy, and they do it, and there's no licensing.
And
Now,
it's usually Yosemite Sam.
yes, and it's but now what happens, right, is Disney comes along and says, well, we saw, and this actually has happened in documentary films. They're interviewing someone, and there's a television in the background, and it happens to be on some random channel. And then the company it was a Seinfeld episode, if I remember correctly, who owns that says, you know what? We feel that you showing Seinfeld actually added to that. And they're like, but that wasn't the point that we were even talking about. No. We think it gave cultural context. We want money. And then the documentation, the person who's making the documentary goes, what? No, I don't agree with that. And so then the person who owns that intellectual property goes, all right, see you in court.
And for somebody like me, if
Now,
I'm the documentary maker, I am a clever user of digital editing tools.
And
so
they
if
remove
I've got
it.
it says, was Seinfeld removed by assholes?
And it gets removed. Now, the trouble with this is that to defend it in a court of law probably costs more than the entire documentary had in budget to make it in the first place.
Just the work of obtaining the rights costs more.
Well,
Well,
it
the
depends.
rights will often be more, but yeah, that has happened as well. So what happens is that the cost of even incidental use is high. Now we're going to try and actually use it. Now the problem with Mickey Mouse is, up until not so many years ago, very, very recently, Mickey Mouse would have been public domain. We could all make Mickey Mouse watches, and it would be part of our cultural heritage. We could then riff on it. We can make Mickey penises or whatever we
I
wanted.
can do that anyway, actually.
So, yeah. So,
I have, as a test.
parody.
Yes.
But we could all use Mickey Mouse. We could now have Mickey Mouse appear in our in our own comic strips and in our own cartoons, and not as parody, but just use them. Unfortunately, because of the increasing protectionism of publisher rights, not creative rights, we are locking up for what is looking to be forever our creative works. Now imagine if Disney did not have Mulan, the story to draw upon, or Cinderella, the story to draw upon. What would they have? Or Fantasia, or anything. What we find is, now imagine if...
You'd have to write fresh stories and pay writers. I like that.
Exactly. Yeah, you would have
Actually,
had
it
written
doesn't matter.
stories.
I'm going to tell you, one reason I can be very sanguine about all this, the content is hungry. There are far more outlets, paid outlets for writers, and really for filmmakers, than there are people that do the work. There are the demand is hungry. I'm always looking for freelancers.
Yep.
You know it's.
So the Creative Commons asks, Lawrence Lessig and Eben and many of these people are now asking, is the price of protectionism, at what point do we break even? At what point do we protect enough, but not too much, and by protecting too much, harm our creative abilities? And they're saying we've gone way beyond that. And they make a very strong case for that these days. So Creative Commons, here's what's cool about it. Let's say I'm writing a book with you. Robin, you and me, we're going to write a book, okay?
Okay.
I click on text. I can pick the standard license.
The Mickey Penis Guide to KDE.
Yeah, that's right. Ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Okay, so...
The difference is I would really do that.
So I can use the standard license right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to define how I want my stuff to be used. This is one of the problems I actually looked at was we have laws saying how to protect, but no way to easily go and register your protection. You can register copyrights, it's expensive, and in process it is. In time, that's why people don't do it.
It takes me 5 minutes to register
Well,
bodies of work. Whole bodies,
then-
stacked. I just send it in by the bushel.
Then why
My wife does it.
then no.
What is it? I have my wife do it. I don't even remember what it costs.
Now, why do we have then, if it's so inexpensive, why do we have the bulk of modern culture media created in the 20th century unattributed? No, answer the question.
Changed recently. There have been several changes to copyright law. The Mickey Mouse Copyright Extension Act is the most recent one. But
It's the Sonny Bono Copyright Act, actually.
it was the Mickey Mouse Copyright Extension Act.
I mean, just so you know, what's his name, the senator from South Carolina, who I can't remember, Hollings. I was referring to him as Senator Hollings D. Disney for a long time.
Way back, you actually
Yeah.
had to register to be able to claim copyright. And that's what the registration was about. Then by treaty,
No.
on treaty,
No, that's
the act of creation,
all right.
by the act of creation, you obtained copyright.
This is actually an interesting.
However,
Yeah.
registration still existed so that you could, upon infringement, provable infringement, claim treble damages.
Okay.
He's right.
What you're talking about is not the same thing. Here's the problem. When something is not registered, as I just said, the vast bulk of media, cultural media, created in the Western world in the last century, is not attributed. Not that it's not protected, not that you don't have to register, you can register it, but when it's not attributed, here's the interesting thing. You legally can't use it until it falls out of copyright. You can try, you can go, I'm going to use it, and hopefully the person who made this, I don't know who it is, isn't going to come out and ask for an egregious amount of money once it's done. Now, because it is a expensive process, and it's expensive because it takes time, it's not well understood, and if you look at the amount of media we come out, you're right, a couple pages, $75, you multiply that by a few million works of art. Suddenly, it becomes extremely expensive in terms of money and time, particularly time, and a little bit of know-how. Well, that's what Creative Commons is changing. What Creative Commons is changing is no, you don't have to file registration, but if you don't file registration, then it becomes locked up. So, and as I said, this has not been happening. People have not been registering most works. So, Creative Commons came along and said, we need to help people create rational, reasonable licenses without huge fees that you can do in 5 minutes, and that protects your work in the way you actually want it to be protected. So, you choose a license. Do I want commercial uses of my work? No. All right. Okay. Do I want to allow modification of my work? Well, I'm going to say yes as long as others share alike.
I go around and around on that, since I believe that, this goes to the question of the integrity of narrative, which puts me on the opposite side of all the mashup people and the hop, clip grabbers and whatnot. But what I really do is narrative. I'm a campfire storyteller, and everything builds toward an ending. And if you start pulling things out of there, you'll probably screw it up.
I'm just going to show them the process, right? So you then pick the jurisdiction of your license if you need one. So if you actually just want to protect it in Canada or generic, I'm going to pick generic worldwide. And this is text. Give me my license. Bing. There's my license. It defines it. There's a legal text that goes along with it, and there's even a little clip you put on your website. Suddenly, your work is attributed and protected explicitly under the terms you wish. From draconian to where I don't want anybody doing anything with what I got. That's what I just picked.
What does it look like?
It looks like
The top.
The little bug up there is on
Right here.
that on stuff.
So this, it looks right here.
Rights reserved.
Some rights reserved, and it's linked. I'll show you what it says. It says, you have selected the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 2.5 license. Don't we love lawyers? See how the license will look on your site's visitors. To your site's visitors. Dunk. Open a new tab here. It'll look like this. Now, when they click on the button here, they get this very clear. Now, this is going to look almost like nothing you've ever seen before from a lawyer because it's clear, it's translated, and it's legal. And it fits on one page. And suddenly, what we have, and here's a human readable summary of the legal code. You can see the full license. There's a disclaimer as well. Here we go. That's what we're used to seeing, isn't it? Dunk, 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 all these. But, and this is what's beautiful about this, it took me 30 seconds to create an attribution-based, reasonable, according to my definition, license for my work. The attribution is the most important thing, because without attribution, your work becomes locked until the intellectual property is free to the commons. And what's happening right now is that's not happening in a rational period of time.
Well,
so attribution is very important.
You're right about that in the great meta-cultural sense. But the ones that I'm about to put out, I want attributions because I have a mortgage and I have needy grandchildren. I have a stepdaughter I'm sending through
And that's fine.
nursing technology school and blah, blah, blah. So I want to make sure that my watermark is on those videos so that people come and do buy the things I have to say for sale. So in that case, actually, these I'm not going to, just no commercial. You say you can change them because I'm going to watermark
Well,
them.
I've actually got no commercial here.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying there's, in this case, but in other words, what I'm saying is the Creative Commons, it's just the words "some rights reserved" are important, and then you get to pick which rights, Mr. or Miss Creator.
Mm-hmm.
Just for those of us like myself who don't exactly understand what you mean by attribution, is that simply the line at the bottom of your work?
Byline.
That says copyright, 2006.
Right. Now, here's a question for you.
Is that what it is?
Exactly. Now, let's say that you want to go buy some Kleenex, a box of Kleenex, but you had no idea where the store was. Could you buy it? Let's say you're in the store, you found the box of Kleenex, you can't find the checkout. They hid it. Right? And you know if you walk out that door, there's a security guard who's going to jump on your back for shoplifting, but you can't find the checkout. What'll happen is you'll go without Kleenex. All right? Or you'll be brave and you'll just say, well, I'm going to walk out the door.
Well, actually, go home
So-
and you'll code your own Kleenex.
You'll make your own Kleenex, yes. So this is what attribution prevents. Attribution allows you to come, or me to come to you, or me to come to Robin and go, oh, you made that. Robin, I would like to use that work. And it allows us to actually decide how this works. And it gets scary because in North America we have a very rational way of doing it in the sense that if you own the work, you're the person who has to go out and say, you can't use it. In other places like Germany, anybody can say, you're using his trademark, you're using his copyright material, I'm taking you to court.
And lots of law firms in Germany
Do nothing.
this
That's their business
for
model.
money. However,
we've actually had one case levied against the KDU project.
Yeah,
I'm
no
good.
thanks.
One was good. I'm full.
The first one's fun,
Yeah.
All right. Attribution, and this is important to me, and it's important to many coders because let's not forget the work on the open source project for the programmer, developer, It's how the programmer gets a job nowadays. So you get a job that pays money, because saying on your resume, I worked on super lockup software, and well, let's see the code. I can't. It was the NDA. But if it's something you can go to source for, you can download, and you can see that guy's work. Attributed work.
That's right.
Yeah, signed work. You can see it. Or you might, and I know, Mike Ballmer was here. I know that he and Martin Fink at HP have actually hired people
Yes.
because they saw attributed stuff and said, this person is good at this. We will hire, and they tracked the person down through code comments and hired them.
Yeah,
And I know
this is-
those are
yeah.
specific people.
Yeah.
I know many others, but
And
there's
this is
guys
why,
you
as a
saw.
software industry, we've become experts at licensing, more or less, thanks to people like Eben and Richard Stallman, because it's so important to us. And the Creative Commons movement shares a lot of the body with the open source movement because we resonate with it
And
quite
on
strongly.
the writing side, what I have to sell is a byline. That's the attribution.
Yes.
The thing in a newspaper that says, by so-and-so. And if an editor butchers something in a newspaper, you'll often see friends. William Claude Dukenfield, who was an American writer and actor in the 1920s and 30s and before that, and good at juggling cigar boxes, which I am bad at, known as W.C. Fields to many of you. He used the name A. Pismo Clam when he felt a script had been butchered by the director or the producer's nephew or whomever. And you'll find that there's a lot of fake names on movies where the script has been, and just as a general rule, if you see more than 3 names as the writers of the screenplay, it's a bad movie, just so you know. But the byline is what I sell. Maybe I've written marketing material. I may have ghost written a few books you don't know about. It may not be your business. And I may have written fiction under other names, but, you know, the Rob Limo Miller, trademarked, by the way, is, you know, my standard trade name and byline name in all tech writing and nonfiction. It's worth money.
And that's also why attribution is important, because
Right.
when he does write under a false name, you still have to actually negotiate with Robin. Not
My
the fictional.
lawyer.
Well, yes, Robin's lawyer, who pretends to be Robin for all intents and purposes. Yes.
Does this go to tracking, the problem of tracking down the holder of this?
And that's actually what Lawrence is suggesting. And not the only one, but he's spearheading this concept that we should have an online, so it's very easy. So I don't have to fill out paper and take it to a bureaucrat's office, which is what you have to do right now, which is why most of it doesn't get done. It's expensive.
37
So,
cents for a
no-
small one.
No,
39
it's
today.
not a monetary expense. This is what the industry keeps telling people. Oh, it's not expensive. It's 37 cents. It's a bloody snap. And we go
39.
39. Oh, yeah, it's 39. I don't live in this country.
stamp.
So the
Yesterday
stamp.
or something.
And it's like, come on, people. We're creators. The guy up there, he's making documentaries. The guy who's filming this, who's like, totally like falling asleep. You. Yeah. How much time do you have in the day to like fill out bureaucratic papers? Yeah, he's still thinking about it. See? So,
That's when the
Yeah.
job is
So-
done. It's,
exactly. So what happens is, and we can go around, we can say, well, no, it's inexpensive, but that flies exactly in the face of what has happened. Because it was inexpensive, it was truly cheap enough, we wouldn't have the attribution problem that's only exacerbated by our unreasonable intellectual property protection. Unreasonable. So what he's suggesting is we have something like Creative Commons, and then you just go plink, and now when I say I want to use that documentary that you made, I can look up the name on a government-run website and go, oh, it was you, and this is the license it's under, and now I know how to get a hold of you or find out if you're dead and have to deal with your, whoever inherited it or whatever. But it gives me a place to start. Now, and that's where it gets really expensive, is finding these non-attributed creators. Because the attribution never happened in the first place, finding them is often nearly impossible. So that's what they're trying to address.
So there is no built-in mechanism within the Creative Commons license build that you just did here to link somebody up with somebody who's attributed the work to themselves and chosen this
No, not one that, not a central database that is recognized and is used as such. No, no, it could be done by pretty much anyone. The first step is getting people to actually build appropriate licenses with attribution, and then the next step is to actually create, and they actually want to get public involvement, public body involvement, because that way the government will tell you, go do it. It only really matters when most people are doing it. So, and there is a trademark office. They do manage these things, and they really don't, yeah, they make it very difficult to do. It's a network effect. So, we'll get people doing these kind of licenses, getting used to click-through licensing their stuff in 5 seconds. And then the next step will be, throw this in the database for me, right? And then when you go to the trademark office and ask them, what about this, they'll come here and search for it, right? And when paper applications do come in, they'll still come in, then they'll put them into, et cetera. But we need people actually building it. So Creative Commons is both a help to people. In the open source world, if we didn't have Eben and Richard Stallman, we wouldn't have the GPL right now. And as open source developers, we'd be in the same quandary that most people in other media, most other creative fields, such as media, video and audio and whatnot, are in. And like, well, what does my license look like? In the software world, we have rubber stamp licenses. We just go, I want that one or that one or that one. And so this is built on the same model. We pick our license based upon its attributes, and then some lawyer wrote it for us and gave it away. Right? Eben did that with the GPL, LGPL, etc. MIT did it with a license, and Berkeley did it with a license, and whatever. So this is bringing that same process to all creative endeavors. So hopefully we get people used to that concept of actually licensing with attribution. And then, yeah, next step is actually pooling that information. Hopefully, one of the nice things about this is now we have, say, Creative Commons. Let's say that when our friend's documentary comes out, he'll probably have a web page about it, most likely, and it'd be really cool if he puts his Creative Commons button on there, because at that point we now can say, if I was to search in Google, I come up with it, I know who it was, right? And then I have a point of contact. So we're kind of relying on Google at the moment in a way, but eventually, yeah, the idea Lawrence is actually saying we should have a central authority where once I've done this part, here's the license I've chosen. I should be able to put it on my website and then come back here and click a button and say, done, I'm in the database, right? And that is the next step. So this is a many, many year project. And thankfully we've got people like Eben and Lawrence that are working on these things, because if it was left up to us non-lawyers, it would never happen. Any other discussion questions, or are we good? All right. Well, I just want to thank Scott again for throwing this together. An amazing guy. Runs HOSEF. Deserves a lot of applause and thanks.
Didn't know if I was going to be able to fill the hour. Now that I have 6 minutes left, I think I'll make it. A couple things. I sort of only had the title of what Aaron was going to talk about, and I'm going to try to bring it on home now. Aaron, you probably have more authority to speak with this here on the subject than I do, because I've only been here a year and a half, and I think you spent, what, 12, 13 years here?
Yeah, but you're here now.
Yeah, so couple minor corrections. It's VI, not VI, although I did hear one sales guy here once call it 6. For those of you who don't know me, I've been involved in Unix since 1980, when the college I was attending in Provo, Utah, which is where Novell started, bought a VAX because the DEC 10 was going to go away. And they put VMS on it because that's what you got, and some of us got a spare disk pack and loaded Berkeley Unix on it at night, and that's how I got started. About 6 months later, somebody from the movie project at BYU wanted a frame buffer written, and I started to learn C by writing a device driver. It was probably the ugliest device driver you've ever seen. I was really more of a Fortran guy at that point. Nearly flunked out of school over computers and Unix. Although I don't know that that's not uncommon for people of my bent. I'm one of those command line guys, although I'm starting to understand that people really do need GUIs. my first experience with Linux was in 1995 when the company I was working for, called Tadpole, had produced a 100 megahertz Pentium notebook, which doesn't seem like big news now, but it was the first one. And although most of the development group was busy getting Windows 95 on the thing and working right, my job was to put everything else in the world, like NextStep and Linux and OS2 and everything else that's now long gone, Novell's NetWare and that kind of thing, on the thing. Most of it was straightforward, some of it wasn't, because it had things like SCSI drives in it and a PCI-based PCMCI controller. And like I said, that was a little weird. What I came here to talk about today is really sort of a couple things. One, I think Hawaii is facing hard times in the future, and for those of you who came to the talk I gave at the Open Source Pizza in October, you already sort of know what I'm going to say for the next 2 minutes. But 25% of Hawaii's economy is tourist-based. 25% of the state product, gross state product, is tourism or tourist-based. And we import 98% of what we consume here. Food, building materials, concrete. You wouldn't really make much here. It all comes in on a, courtesy of our friends at Matson. For those of you who've been here for a long time, you probably remember things like the longshoremen strike and the island running out of things like toilet paper. An idea that's almost unconceivable in the mainland. But, I mean, it's part of living on an island. But you sort of got to take that and understand that, like I said, 25% of everything we do in the state is tourism. Used to be mostly agriculture, now it's really mostly tourism. I think the next 20% is military. So, almost half the state is stuff that could go away. We also have this thing about rising energy prices. All the electricity made on the island for us is basically oil. It's almost all oil. It's not coal, it's not natural gas, because those two things don't transport that well. You got to get it here first, which means transporting it, and then you got to pay for it. So I think that there could be sort of this crossing of two lines where as the energy prices continue to increase, and it may be just like a frog in a pot of water on a stove, where if you slowly turn the temperature up, the frog doesn't really understand that the world's getting hot until it's too late. Crossed by the fact that what we do here is so dependent upon energy. You got to get the tourists here for them to spend the dollars. You got to get everything we consume here. And as those two things become more expensive, I think we'll see a slow drop off in the number of tourists as they're spending their dollars paying for things that require energy, like the fact that their salad comes from 1,300 miles away. The other thing is that there's a sort of 30-year-old, 35-year-old movement in Hawaii to sort of restore some of the culture that got destroyed in the process of becoming first a territory and then a state. I can't speak with any great authority to this, but I am somewhat sympathetic to it. For HOSIF to continue, I think everybody can look around the room and see that, well, right now there are 6 people in the room. There have been as many as probably 20 at times. But TPOSSCON was sort of originally envisioned as a funding exercise, an interesting way to fund HOSIF, and this isn't going to do it. So I think that, we're going to have to find a way to replace the dollars of tourism, and it would be nice, in any case, to have a more diverse economy than what we have. And at the same time, I think there's a way to sort of help out some of these native language efforts. Where did my mouse go? So I found this poem while I was on the Big Island last week. Kiloha is actually a guy named Steve Wang, or Steve Wong, who's an MIT grad, a recent MIT grad in environmental sciences. And I'll just read this. This is just an excerpt out of the part of it. And I'm actually really pleased you're here, because you may be able to give me the other side of this. It says, "You'll never understand the implications of a race that doesn't embrace its own culture." And I think a lot of Hawaii has been stripped of its culture until you're standing in the midst of a Hale wasteland. The greatest trick they ever played on us was to make us believe our language and religion were inferior. That we should punish school kids who didn't speak proper English, and persecute the men and women who didn't believe in Jesus Christ but found God through Ku, Lano, Kanola, and Kane. Am I butchering that too badly? Now, he goes on to say that, you know, the culture of the U.S. has actually done quite a bit. I mean, he went to a U.S. school and was educated here such that he could attend there and bring some of these environmental technologies back to Hawaii. And the poem is not as strongly slanted as the excerpt I've taken here. But the part about, you know, the first line, where you'll never understand the implications of a race that doesn't get its own culture, you know, that has abandoned its own culture. And a lot of the Kaiono ads have similar things going on right now about, you know, sort of Hawaii being able to the Hawaiians especially being able to self-identify again. You know, the quickest way to destroy culture is to destroy its language. There are concepts and idioms embedded in a language that are unexpressible in other languages. And, you know, those words and those legends mean something to a people, even if they're just part of their heritage. I can't find any Hawaiian translations of Linux or other free and open source software. Not a one. Now, I may have missed something. So I'm here proposing exactly the thing that Robin said he gets all the time, which is a Hawaiian Linux distro, a translated, as a first step, Hawaiian Linux distro. And I think at some point after that, we can start to build sort of a software ohana, a collaborative sort of Hawaiian-based effort to build an infrastructure around this. So, you know, as a first step, because they're so easily to translate, because the tools are there, I would like to see a Hawaiian translation of, you know, Kubuntu. It could be Fedora too. I mean, I'm not married to Kubuntu. It just happens to work really, really well, and it's got a culture behind it that understands that translation is important. It actually started in South Africa. There are other translations. The tools exist. I think, you know, over time, and I don't mean a lot of time here, but if we could actually also foster, if not help, translate this into other Polynesian languages that are also potentially slighted by the software economy at large.
Are they actually? I mean,
There are, you can do these things in some languages, but you can't do them on any kind of free or open source platform. Yeah. I mean, they just don't, it's not that you can't do them, they just don't exist. And as you just heard for the past 2 hours, it's actually, there are people who can do it who probably don't know that they can. You know, English too, because I'm not a native Hawaiian speaker. I butcher the language and read simple words. The other thing we could do is we could set things like defaults to Hawaiian time. I mean, when you install one of these, you know, operating systems, be it Windows or, you know, anything else, on a computer, new or used, you end up fiddling with it for about the next day or two. You know, even I do. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't set the time right in the right place. And if we know it's going to be in Hawaii, then we know we can set the time zone to Hawaiian. And we can do things like, you know, prefetch calendars of interest to the local population, that kind of thing. People who have an artistic bent could do Hawaiian-like icons, or, you know, without, you know, respecting culture, but I think the people who are in the culture will tend to respect the culture more than the people who are out of it. Screen backgrounds, you know, interesting scenery, that kind of thing. Again, just like you sort of heard, like I didn't really seriously know what Aaron was going to talk about, but we could do language or distro-specific documentation. Because it's a local distribution, and because potentially something very, very similar is running in a lot of schools due to what HOSIF has already done and continues to do, I think we could actually create a situation where your support may be available in your neighborhood. You know, potentially at no cost, but, you know, you could throw the kid who otherwise would have mowed your lawn $20 to, you know, fix your computer for you. And we can continue on the mission that HOSIF has been on, which is to sort of reclaim and recycle computers. I believe, in talking to Scott, that there are more computers out there than we know what to do with. We literally have warehouses full of them. I propose this as donationware. You probably want to do 2 SKUs of the CD. I believe that the local computer establishments, CompUSA, and the smaller houses could actually sell this across the counter for $5. You know, they take half of it, we take half of it. That works out for most retail places. We could do a, you know, free CD. Scott's not in the room, but I will actually sign up to funding the first 5,000 printings of this if we do this. I'll write a check to HOSIF to pay for the first 5,000 of these things just to get it seeded. HOSIF is a nonprofit. It actually has a mission to improve Hawaii in terms of its open source content and education. I think that something like this, if it succeeds, if it takes, starts the grass fire, could actually start to sort of blossom out where, Hawaiian employers are using open source in their business, so they need, system administrators who are already familiar with it. Those people potentially already familiar with it because they've seen the same thing in school. If HOSIF starts to run Edubuntu, and I think they probably should because it eliminates a lot of the packaging that has to be done, then Ubuntu or Kunbuntu, especially a Hawaiian variant of it, looks the same. And I think, I actually believe that HOSIF has a mindset to funnel all of the funds it gets directly back into its efforts. It's not your normal sort of charitable organization where 40% scraped off the top to, enhance the lifestyle of the directors. And I am one of those directors, and I want nothing in terms of funding from, HOSIF. So I believe we should, move to Edubuntu as soon as it's practical. So ASAIP is as soon as is practical. Our young people, from elementary school on up, get a really early introduction to something that acts, is very similar to exactly what they find at home. If this software is already done, and if we can make it catch fire, then I think we'll find it on a lot of reclaimed computers. I spent my New Year's Eve fixing a neighbor's computer. Now it's the couple that my wife sails with. They're in their 70s. The guy's a retired engineer, real bright. They're both real bright. They're both still real active. I hope I'm that healthy when I'm in my 70s. But the old computer had crashed or something. I didn't get involved with that part, but they had a brand new computer and it wasn't working right. I spent 4 or 5 hours over there New Year's Eve. Now they were feeding me vodka and tonics and, the whole 9 yards. I didn't have a bad time. But if we were that much closer, I would have gone and got a CD from home and brought it back over and fixed it for him. It's running Windows. It turns out the problem was actually the software firewall that the vendor had loaded on it thing. But for the longest time, it looked like a problem with the DSL provider. What I ended up doing is going back home and getting a small FreeBSD-based firewall, one like we sell, and just bringing it back and figuring it and putting it in place and disabling his firewall. Now, that cost me a couple $100, but I didn't really care. It sort of fixed the problem, and like I said, my wife goes out sailing with them every week, so maybe they won't leave her stranded out there someday. But if we were that much closer, seriously, I would have gone back and gotten a CD and plugged it in and said, here, you're done. And really the only reason I didn't do that is because he likes Google Earth, and it's not available on Linux yet. And talking to Aaron, it should be, because it's written in the thing he's involved in, Qt. The distro should also make it easy to reach the people who are running it with new software offers, be it the free or commercial. So HOSIF already has the infrastructure in place to be able to do these kinds of things. We could run a secondary repository for the localizations and for Hawaii developed content, so it would just become available. We could also add a service directory where there are, you could find people local who are willing to work on this stuff for charge or not. And I was part of the Free Software Foundation service directory for the longest time, and it actually led some really interesting jobs. I spent 6 months down in Indonesia working for Freeport McMoran. I didn't know they were that bad environmentally till I was down there, until I got down there. But I got to live at 12,000 feet working on, putting fiber-based networks together in the middle of a jungle. And it's, it was in some ways a great time. And it led to several other, sort of interesting opportunities. So you never really, I've talked to some people here about, who want to start their own thing, and you never really know where the next thing's coming from. You don't know what this thing you did today is going to develop into. Earlier on when the company I owned was called Smallworks, we, made 7 figures, I'll just say it that way, from Cisco. But the initial contact was, can you write a spec for us? And they sort of threw a few $100s over the table for the spec. It turned into a full software development thing. So you never really know what this very small opportunity could blossom into. Potential partners here are the charter schools. I talked almost weekly with a guy named David Cornejo here on the island, who's one of the big FreeBSD guys, who also was part of Firetide, who some of you may remember. His wife is very involved with the charter school that's downtown here, and he tells me on a weekly basis about all the problems they have. They need, firewalls and antivirus stuff and all the rest of it. And I sort of scratch my head and think, gee, if we could just eliminate the requirement for a few of those things, we could do something very different. I know that there are some immersion schools here on the island. I think, being able to run the computers in Hawaiian for those immersion schools is, it's a critical requirement. I don't want to really get into the politics or not about Kaiona, but Kaiona could be a big sponsor for this and a distributor of it. The Hawaii Department of Education is an obvious example because HOSIF's already involved with them. UH, and you may know of others.
Who is Kyle?
Kaiona is the Hawaii Department of Hawaiian Affairs branding for a registry of Hawaiians. Did I call that wrong, or is that right? Kauinoa, sorry. Like I said, I've only been here 18 months. Be gentle. So, the issues. I don't speak the language. Now, I'm willing to learn. I'm going to go, to HCC or UH or HPU even and start taking Hawaiian classes and getting involved, because I would actually, and the best way to learn is by doing, but I would actually like to learn to speak the language. I think it's important when you're living here. There are people in the room already who speak Hawaiian, and I think there are a lot of people in the islands who can do it as well. It needs critical mass. If we do this and get sent on 100 computers, it's sort of going to be an interesting experiment, but not going to go anywhere. If it gets on 10,000 computers, that's a real different thing. If there's 10,000 of these things. And there are people in the audience, Mr. Belford, who know how to sort of create that marketing that generates the interest that can create critical mass. I'm not very good at it. I said, if it's successful, we will get emulated. People will come here to find out how we did it. And there needs to be an individual who can, or a set of individuals who can deal with those people. And I guarantee you'll have representatives of foreign governments, non-government entities, journalists, all the rest of it, wanting to come here on an almost daily basis. Your calendar will be full of people who want to say, how do we do what you've done where we are? Where can we get all the stuff? Who can we talk to? That kind of thing. I think that's a full-time position if this is successful for one or more people. And that's really all I have, so there you go. Thanks. Yeah.
That's a fascinating idea, I think. And, I'm wondering a lot of things, but has anything like it been done anywhere else? You're talking about quite an extension from simple localization and internationalization of a distribution.
I think if you go and look to the side of the Ubuntu project and see what's happening in Thailand and South Africa and the other South African nations except South Africa, India, other places like that, you'll find very, very similar things happening. I don't know that they start out with a proposal to do it more than they grew organically. Mark Shuttleworth, who's the founder and driver of the Ubuntu project, is very, very interested in this kind of thing happening, especially for so-called third world nations. So I don't know that they've been driven quite the same way, but in terms of restoring culture, but very, very similar things have happened. Very similar ecosystems are building around these projects in other places.
You're thinking of taking Ubuntu itself and flavoring it here, or starting with the Debian core?
Probably Ubuntu. The Debian core itself is great for people like me. If you're going to go out and put this in front of people who don't program for a living, who don't care to ever see a DOS prompt. This guy helped New Year's Eve. I kept popping up a DOS prompt on his computer so I could see what was really going on, and he kept wondering he'd never seen that window before and wanted to know what it was, and I had to explain to him that, he had run DOS way back. And I said, well, it's DOS. There's Windows under, or there's DOS under Windows, and he didn't know. And he said, well, yuck, I never really got along with DOS. And I was like, well, you never have to run it when I'm not here. It's not part of your world. The guy's a retired acoustics engineer, really sharp, and I mean still sharp in what he knows. And he kept saying, well, I'm really stupid because I don't understand this stuff. I was like, well, no. If we were here doing something with acoustics, I'd be the dumb guy in the room. It's just what I've done for 25 years. It's not that, you don't get it. It's just that it's what I've done every day for 25 years. Now, you get good at almost anything if you do it that often. You can learn to play. I can teach anybody to play the piano in 25 years. I guarantee it. In far less, but you'll at least be able to entertain an audience. You may not be Van Cliburn, but I'm not either. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, so maybe there's some synergy there with, say, what Gordon Bruce was saying, where the city and county wants to be an incubator. Probably wouldn't be a great opportunity to incubate a desktop or two of our locally flavored and customized Hawaiian distribution.
I see nothing but opportunity out of something like this, and I don't really see a lot of negatives. Although I do give deference to Robin and Aaron, who sort of came up here and said you shouldn't do your own distro.
It's not our own distro so much as taking, I was just talking to Robin a little bit about it, is taking an existing distro and eliminating an hour's worth of customization when you first install it.
Yeah.
So they're really matching what we got going on here.
Do you have any sense of how to quantify the market for this, or the potential? How many Hawaiian language speakers are there in the state?
What are there? Almost 400,000 Hawaiians actually living in Hawaii. Yeah, it's in that order of magnitude.
Well, those are the number of part or full-blooded Hawaiians.
Right.
But they're not all Hawaiian speakers, and they're not the only
Sure.
potential. I mean, you're interested in.
So there are almost 1 million people on Oahu, and a smattering of people on the other islands, and a bunch of people in Vegas. The ninth island, as it were. In Oregon. Okay.
Yeah.
There's an organization with a lot of money that's kind of interested in Hawaiian things. It's called Fish at the State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I put the slides together in the car this morning. So.
But, so a distribution Hawaiian flavor, that you can choose to have it be in nothing but Hawaiian language.
Right.
But a lot of the customizations, the calendaring, the localization, you can still choose English or Chinese or Japanese for that matter.
Sure.
Still have your Hawaiian localization.
And we have very large bodies of Chinese and Japanese native speakers here as well, and it would just work for them as well.
In the characters, there's already
The IN8 support's already there, so that's not a really big issue. It's really finding or developing a set of native speakers, or at least people who can check what's being done. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently it's been a couple years ago. UHD moved? Yeah.
I think parts of this little subversive, the DOE has a very hard time saying no to native content. Well, yeah, it's sort of like, saying bad things about the Pope in certain parts of the world. I mean, it's, and I'm sort of a subversive guy, so. Any other questions?
So what happens if Microsoft asks you to write
Right.
like a Hawaiian language interpreter?
Great, so Microsoft, as far as I know, somebody has done similar work for Microsoft platforms. As far as I know, I don't know. I believe they probably have. Somebody's found a small market for that. Yeah, Apple does. And there used to be a lot of Apples in the school. And they're being replaced by PCs running Windows. So, well, you know, there's a set of Macs at my kids' elementary school, then they're sort of off in their own little lab. All those things can run the same thing. In fact, you know, one of the sort of second thing we do after we get an x86 slice of this is done is go right back and do a PowerPC slice of it. That's really just building the CD. All the other work's been done. But, you know, I think there's a lot of Macs out there that are about to be all but abandoned because people see the future of the Macintosh platform as being on x86. And, you know, I've got this 2-year-old PowerPC. It runs Linux fine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
I think, to that extent, there's been a change in the policy in the DOE, because they've now realized that because ESIS is Java-based, and because they're so far behind on the ESIS rollout, that they're saying, hey, if you got an old Mac, you can still run ESIS on that.
Right.
And that was the motive for pulling Macs and standardizing on the Windows platform.
Well, there's that, and there are a lot of the technology coordinators in these schools tend to be a lot more, at least the ones a couple of ones I've met have been very, very Windows friendly and very Mac, you know, unfriendly. You know, I mean, I want to throw up when my kid gets taught PowerPoint at school. It's just, you know, no, you know. But, you know, he's the child of 2 technologists and doesn't have his own computer. I mean, I think there are far more interesting things to do when you're 8 than sit at a keyboard.
Scott gave a good definition of a tech coordinator earlier on. Said the person that helps your sister resolve the problem on her computer. I was a tech coordinator before in elementary school. And,
Yeah.
the teachers need to use the simplest tools.
Yeah. I got involved with the elementary school locally, and, you know, the very first thing, my kid's in 1st grade, and the teacher's like, can't you fix my computers for me? And I'm like going, am I even supposed to touch your computer for you? I mean, it's, you know, I did similar things in Texas. We went and wired schools in Texas. Just, you know, we'd, you know, contact the PTA, and the principal would bless it, and we would show up and, you know, create networks in schools. Hi, I'm behind the mic. Hi.
So
Almost.
what Jim's suggesting
All right.
here is,
Okay,
that
all right.
we take the Ubuntu project and we slightly localize it for Hawaii so that you can do a completely native Hawaiian installation, or you can do an installation in Chinese or Japanese, but we go ahead and have a pre-seed it for, you know, our local time zone, for, you know, some events that ought to go ahead and be on our local calendar, and so that it's a slight extension of Ubuntu with a local flavoring, and in particular for the Hawaiian people, there's one that, you know, takes in all the Hawaiian fonts and it's completely Hawaiian.
Mark, if we talk to Mark, but there, I don't think this came up at all, but Ubuntu's mechanism, like all the technology back end, is built around being able to create custom distribution.
Right. And that's one of the big reasons for picking Ubuntu rather than, you know, Fedora, which started on the island. You know.
Yeah, because that'd be all on your own shoulders.
Right. It's a lot more work.
Now, whether or not they'd be okay at this point, that's why they wouldn't, I can't speak for them, of opening up that directly to the folks. But I would be surprised if he said no. I would be very surprised. I think if you went to him and said, yeah, we're going to translate this, and you want to add a few files here and there, and what they would ask is just you make the packages, the Debian packages.
Sure.
And then you give it to them, and they'll create the CD images and all that stuff.
Well, even before that, you were both out of the room, but I basically said I'd fund the first 5,000 CDs. So.
Okay. And so Jim feels like that could help to kind of set forth a template for localizing, so that then when someone in Cambodia wants to have a sub-Cambodian version, it could be done to work through the 4 or 5 or 6 or 18 steps that.
And like I said, several times you weren't in the room. I didn't know what you were going to talk about other than the title of your slide, and I knew I was going after you, but it's almost exactly what you said applied to local economies. And I do agree with you that we have been whipped into being a consumer society, but we all produce as well as consume.
No, that is exactly, this is a perfect application
Right.
of the computation law.
I think it's a great idea, and there's also a great amount of people that work for
Right.
Actually, I know a lot of the kids, they're in fine immersion school, and how, parents are always concerned that there's going to be such a focus on culture and Hawaiian language that they won't be able to have the skills for technology. And, something like this, it will complement both, aspects. And I can't see an immersion school telling you they wouldn't want to do this.
Yeah.
They're going to want to do this.
Were you with the first day?
The fleet is usual Hawaiian.
Yeah.
What you're describing, right, is the protection of cultural equity.
Yeah, and Hawaii, I think, is very unique in the sense that they would identify this. If you went to Texas or
No,
Arizona, state, I don't think that would be a big deal for them to have their own distribution.
I would never stand in front of myself in the mirror and say we should do a Texas distribution of Linux, and I lived there for 12 years. I mean, and it is a whole other country, but, it doesn't make any sense there. I think it does make sense here.
There's a lot of uniqueness here that only a distribution like that would appeal to, and that's, I think, where you can really notice it.
And it's a growing cultural awareness too. I mean, only 10, 15 years ago, it was essentially had been driven to zero almost, and it's grown, and it continues to grow.
There's been a cultural renaissance for Hawaiians, yes.
Yeah.
There's other Pacific Isles in American Samoa where, the question they've had of me is, this Linux is neat, it's going to be in all of Samoa.
Well, and then you missed a slide, but I was like, and we should, turn around and do Samoan or do Fijian or, something where we can find, again, sort of local peoples. Because I think until we really figure out how to do the second or third one, it's like waffles, the first one you throw away. It's like, oh yeah, now I know how to do it.
Maybe we should do the first one somewhere else.
Well, no,
Immersion schools, there's a lot of them are charter schools.
Right.
Schools are easy to work with. I worked with Nanakuli, and they were willing, as part of their creed was, let's take a chance, let's do something different, let's make some risks. And, and they also had a lot of money because of that.
Yeah.
They're just saying, I'm a charter school, so we're going to take a chance, and we're willing to put money on it.
see, even a 7-year-old who can speak native Hawaiian can sit with somebody who can't and tell you what the word is for file, potentially. I mean, even if they're slightly wrong, it can be corrected later. So, I mean, you could do this with a whole pile of 7 and 8-year-olds, I mean, if you really wanted to. I think it's very, very doable. I think it's something that we should do. I don't think it's a requirement by any means, but I think it could create interesting opportunities for everybody on the island and other islands.
Just out of curiosity, what do you do for words, technical terminology in Hawaiian? Yeah.
You take the idea behind the word and you translate that idea, you sort of translate from English to the idea.
It was a car.
Yeah.
I've heard no cars here before.
Yeah.
Why is it a word for four-wheel? It's a car. There's a word for everything. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not a dead language. It's an alive language.
Yeah.
It's an alive culture.
So a lot of those
It's
are,
saved. And the only way we can save it is through using it.
You have to live it.
Operating in what's
You know,
new.
the reason why Latin was termed dead is because no one used it except the priesthood, and they would reserve Latin for themselves. It's like, oh, you want the translation of Latin? Give me some money,
Those people at your age who are so condescending about their Hawaiian, it's got to be this way and everything. But still, it's an alive language, and there's going to be words for it.
The first day I talked about preserving cultural equity as being one of the things that open source does.
Yeah.
I think that this is a perfect confluence of both of, what we talked about, say, about being participating, but also preserving cultural equity. There's value, large value, to return that. Yeah, I would say the technology should come at the price. And what you said was just, I thought what you said was eloquent and very, very accurate. I mean, that trade-off is unfair. It's not fair to just ask people to make that trade.
Unfortunately, a lot of people in, who want to, preserve the Hawaiian culture is they're doing it at the cost of losing the future.
Yeah.
And, with what you're doing, you can bring these two together. They can still participate in their culture, not feel, separated from it, and still be in the modern. They can use a browser instead of saying quit or exit. It's going to say pow.
Yeah. Pow. Yeah. Yep.
I think the biggest barrier to adoption of something like that is that perception on both cannot do both, because there's a lot of pride involved on either side of that fence that says, you know, we have to maintain the integrity of this. A merging of the two is more what is appropriate, because neither can survive with every intact concept on both sides of the fence. They can only butt heads against it. And unless there is an adoption of, okay, technology can adapt in this way, because there's adaptation that comes both ways. It's that perception that the adaptation is what causes survival.
That's a new concept, though. And I agree that it exists, but there's good reason for it existing. Before we had Conqueror and Firefox as two open source browsers, it was not possible. You could go and bang your head all day on getting a Hawaiian IE or a Hawaiian Opera or whatever, or Hawaiian Netflix. It wouldn't happen. So, and of course, other technologies, you know, generations ago, they were just thrust upon whether they made cultural sense or not. There was no ifs, ands, or buts, just do it our way. So, I mean, it's only recently, I think, that we've made it possible for people to get involved in their own cultural terms. Because I think before they were exclusive. If you wanted to use a computer, you had to speak one of the 7 languages that are spoken by more than 100 million, 200 million people.
Well, speaking to your getting involved presentation, the advocacy you're talking about in India, unless it starts in that culture will not accept it, because you have to have someone who understands the target culture, not target as in something to process, but target in as where you want it to grow.
Question for you. Can you see yourself getting involved in helping out, or are you already? And like, what would that look like? I'm interested in.
Yeah, because technically, I'm not even Kamanaina. I mean, it's, I wasn't born here. I know it, but I mean, it matters for some people. But yeah, yeah. Well, I'm never leaving. I'll die before I leave. Yeah.
And they know what technology can do, and they realize the social and cultural problems in Hawaii. So they're the best people that we can start with, and then they can provide the workforce. And, in a way, it's a little gimmicky, maybe a Hawaiian distribution, but that's okay. How else can you bring Linux and what it can do for communities in the world and everything else, blah, blah, save the world?
Do you have contests with the target schools?
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like you know the people quite well. I mean,
He coaches paddling at one of them.
Paddling is the social mecca of the island.
that sounds like you've got a great resource already, right here to start getting them involved. Is it possible for you to take this concept to them?
I'll work with you too and help you on the technical side, where you might be.
Yeah. By the way, I don't have to own this one. I just think it needs doing. Yeah.
Get involved. But I think the beautiful thing too about the open source community, and something that the Hawaiian culture will adopt and adapt very easily to, is the concept of community. It is at the heart of what open source is.
And before you get carried away with the concept of Hawaiian, it's not exactly all Hawaiian, because, Hawaii as a place is not just all either
Right.
Hawaiian or you're not Hawaiian. I mean, other
You're-
people who may not be blood quantum Hawaiian feel Hawaiian,
Right.
or they're from Hawaii, they're born and raised Hawaii, and when they see that it's something local,
Yeah.
there's buy-in there too.
Yeah.
So it's much broader than just looking at the narrow quantum of Hawaiian, racial extraction. It's going to get local.
It's really designed to sort of solve a problem I see coming, which is to get a little more technology content going here and get a little ecosystem going around that, and at the same time sort of almost extract value from that local identity. Sort of use that as a lever to sort of gain popularity.
I think that one of the big advantages that will come long term from it is the sense that once the community, and I'm not going to use the term Hawaii because you're right, that, that will start a snowball effect that I really think this culture is all about. It's about helping each other.
It's aloha. I mean, seriously, it's, how many people know that Ethernet started here? Ethernet. Yeah. No, seriously, the progenitor to Ethernet was a project called Aloha, which was a radio network here. So, wireless networking started here too. But Bob Metcalf, who was looking for a PhD thesis, was sitting on the beach sort of talking to Ron, or Noam. A lot of technology started here, the wikis, or the idea sort of gained formation here. Akamai, is.
If I can recommend anything, make sure that, and I was saying Scott, he was talking about bringing in the Samoan DOE and doing the same thing there. I'm more than happy to help coordinate on the KDE side to get translations into, which will help, which then flows down into all the distributions. So there's distribution-specific pieces, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the general.
Sure.
I'm more than happy to help on both sides. You probably already have connections within Ubuntu. If you don't, you want names and addresses, I'm happy to help there as well. But get a project set up, right? Actually, start it, meet over lunch. Get people to talk to and what you want to accomplish next month. That participation kind of do it thing. And I'm excited about it. I mean, this is something that I can go back and go, wow, you don't believe. When we talked about it, people came in and talked about it. Next thing you know, we've got technology coming out from the people, for the people, technology that allows them to, as you said, engage the future without giving up the past. And that's a beautiful message. I think there's a lot of value. So I'm from the upstream side of KDE, I'm more than happy to help in however I can. I don't speak the line, but I'm more than happy to make sure that get that process started.
You can do the kitchen side of it.
That's the next distribution.
It's the best distro.
I was thinking about the translation into Army.
I don't think it's going to be, it's a language.
It is.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a culture.
It's a culture.
And if it can happen here in Hawaii, it can happen anywhere in the South Pacific, right? And if it can happen in the South Pacific, it can happen anywhere, right? I mean, I don't think it's gimmicky at all. I think there's actual, real value to it.
Now I speak KDE.
No, that's good.
Whoa, dude.
It's actually funny because I've lived in a few different places. I have kind of a messed up accent apparently, and I've got a mishmash of Americanisms and Hawaiian Islandisms and Canadianisms. And I'm trying to work on it when I speak publicly, and I also speak really fast. So whenever I go to, especially when I go to Europe, people cannot understand me.
Do you end your sentences with or bra?
Well, he just goes holo holo once in a while.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I was actually at a conference. There was an Australian fellow, and he was doing a presentation on a project that he and I had been involved in together, and he couldn't remember a detail. And so he was like, "Do you remember?" I was like, "Yeah, it was this." And we started talking back and forth, and we just evolved into this rapid fire, Australian versus Canadian thing, and eventually a German guy took a hand slowly. And he was like, "Can you please stop speaking with so much jargon because we can't understand the words you're saying?" So much slang, sir. So much slang.
You can always stop the Australians cold by calling them palms.